Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Drew Pavlu Show, episode 29. Who would have thought we'd make it to 29 episodes? But we're doing very well. It's actually doing a lot better than we expected. We're slowly building up a better audience. If you're watching, guys, just tell me, hit comment, let me know who's watching. I'm going to be joined by CJ, and CJ is going to be debating with me about the Australian Greens and socialism. It's going to be a very interesting debate. I'm going to quickly share the link out to everybody. One second. So we've got an Australian Greens member today, but he's a funny shit poster. So I think it will be funny. Just sending out the links. I'll send the link to CJ to join. Steve says, good day, mate. Hey, Steve. Thanks for always joining, man. Deluxe Driver. We're going to have CJ on. Snazzy Scotsman. Hey, mate. How you going? Thanks for joining, mate. I appreciate the repeat viewers, guys. It's very good. It's very good. And then I love even Xi Jinping's here. Thank you, Xi. Thank you, my friend. Okay, hang on. I'm going to quickly give CJ the invite link. And I will ask him as well to share it with his lefty friends, because we want to have a good debate here tonight, and we will have a discussion. I just sent a message to my friend Eric. Eric, if you're watching, shout out to Eric. See, it's very parasocial. You're chatting with the live stream. I've got my friend Eric watching for the first time today, I believe. Hang on, I'm just sending the link to CJ. We did CJ as in the base left winger. I wouldn't say he's based, but he's funny. He is funny. So 5 hours tonight. I'm not sure if we're going to be doing 5 hours. By the way, guys, following from my discussions yesterday with everybody with the chat, where we were discussing how do we make Drew look less fat, I did shave. I hope you guys have noticed, and let me know what you think. Ben says, is this worth watching over Q&A? Absolutely, mate. Q&A is fucking boring. Q&A is so fucking boring. Eli, let's go. I don't always say to the end, but I try to get involved to spank the like button. Guys, if you're watching, spank the like button. Smash the like button. Comment as well. We need to get as many people on the stream as possible. So if you're watching on YouTube, smash the motherfucking like button. Yeah, Q&A is literally... Who's actually on the panel with Q&A tonight? I bet that would be really fucking boring. I mean, I could even just watch it with CJ and get the guy to prove he is a socialist. I bet he doesn't want a planned economy, just wants welfare state slot with wokeness. I don't know. We'll ask him. He's a neo-Kortskyist, apparently. Yep, shout out Eric. I'm going to have Eric on this week, I think, as a guest. You see, this is kind of like a radio type show, right? I've just got to speak for like 5 hours. So I will always I will always be on the lookout for guests, guys. If you've got recommendations, a person says, good evening, mate. You look extremely young. Actually, you are young. I'm 26. 26 in June. It's a shame that it's... I'm told that Ed Husich is on the Q&A panel tonight. Is it just Ed Husich? Who else is on it? Oh, CJ's here. CJ, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, good audio. Are you going to do video or no video?
No video.
Okay. CJ, should we start off? Should we watch a bit of Q&A and just have your comments? Or do you want to just go straight into chatting and discussing?
We can watch Q&A if you want. That sounds fun. Is this the Cope stream with all the...
Yeah, maybe just to ease us into it, we'll watch maybe like 10 minutes of Q&A and just get your thoughts. Now, CJ, share this stream around with all your lefty friends, because we want as many people watching this thing as possible. We've got We've got 28 live viewers on YouTube now. It's growing up. It's building. Pabo, I'm at a Chinese restaurant abroad somewhere. Any message for the Han staff there? I would just say respect to the Han people. We love the Han people. It's just the CCP we're against. Drew, let's just ease into it. Take it nice and slow. Very true. Drew's single-handedly saving ABC's ratings. So true. This fellow sounds a bit like his PFP. So tell us, CJ, who is your PFP right now?
That's Ernst Bloch. He's a German Frankfurt School philosopher. I just grabbed a picture of him off Google because he used to be my PFP on Twitter, and I didn't really feel like the punished Max Chandler Mather was befitting.
Yeah, the punished Max Chandler Mather one is pretty funny. I got a comment. Did you ask a question on Q&A once to Malcolm Turnbull? No, not to Malcolm Turnbull. I have asked 2 Q&A questions before. One time I had a fight with Tony Jones on the show, and I've never been allowed back, basically. Yes. So CJ, you are a Greens Party member. Were you a Labour Party member at some point? I thought you were a Labour Party guy.
I was.
So when were you a member of the Labour Party?
Early 2023 to the end of 2024.
And okay, that's interesting. Why is it that you're willing to have a discussion with me? Because look, no one else on the socialist sort of side of Australian politics wants to talk to me. Everyone else goes, "Oh, he's the big bad bully. We won't talk to him." I tried to do a discussion with Purple Pingers during the election. No luck on that part. So why is it? How come you're willing to talk to Drew, but no one else on the socialist left is willing?
Well, I don't know. I respect your posting ability. You're one of the few liberal Twitter users who has good posting ability. It's you and Will Stansel, I think, that are pretty high up there.
Well, look, I was going to say, why? Obviously, I'm. Everyone knows I'm no fan of the Greens or socialism, but I was happy to have CJ on because I do find your post quite funny, and we can go through some of your tweets and just discuss. I liked your one where you put the Mussolini filter on Elbow, and you were saying that you were saying Mussolini. You're saying Elbow was a corporatist or something like that? Please explain that idea.
I mean, it's humorous. I don't actually think Elbow is like a classical fascist, but there's definitely elements that, like in the Labour Party, I think they are kind of inventing corporatism from first principles here with all of Albow's talk about reaching out to business and.
So you would say it's appropriate to say Ija Alala if Peter Khalil is appointed assistant minister for defense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Ija. Well, I mean, look, one thing I am happy about is you saw the M Son of the Century series, which is actually such an amazing series. I don't know anyone else who's watched it. It's so good.
It is excellent. It is. I mean, I don't watch much stuff, but it's probably like my favorite show I've watched in a long time. Like, it's really fucking good.
Yeah. No, it is actually unfathomably goated. And like, I think one good thing about it is like, it is obviously anti-fascist at the end of the day. Like it basically goes through like all the disgusting violence they did and everything, and how brutal they were. But I think I think one interesting thing about it though is it's like the first show I've ever really seen where they're like they try and it seems like one of like the central themes of the show is to try and show how people become fascist. And like,
I mean, at the start, I think Mussolini was actually quite sympathetic, like to the audience.
What do you say? Sorry.
I think at the start of Son of the Century, like Mussolini is like kind of a sympathetic character, but then obviously very quickly it's kind of made very clear.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, it obviously he obviously came from a socialist background, and at first he was like sort of like a Republican and anti-elite and all that, but then it very quickly becomes like he very quickly sells out and just like starts bashing up socialists for the landlords, etc.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, let's watch a little bit of Q&A. We'll ease into it.
The Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.
Good to have a welcome to country.
On whose land we're broadcasting from tonight. Remember, you can live stream us around the country. iView, socials, Quandra is the hashtag. Please get involved.
Very powerful.
We're going to start tonight with a quick whip around the panel on a question I think I'd like to hear your view on.
It's always good when they whip around the panel.
Lead the Liberal Party after tomorrow. Latika.
Neither.
Okay, tell us what you really think. Neither?
I don't think
I've met Latika before.
David?
Well, I hope they choose.
She's at the
woman capable of leading.
She's a great theorist of Australian politics.
Good step change for them.
Okay, I'm sure that's helped Susan Lee's chances having a Greens endorsement. Ed Husick?
Well, whoever. I was going to say not Peter Dutton.
Well, that's not going to happen.
Someone that's actually they can believe in what they believe in, but are prepared to work with others. So it's up to them to choose who they want, but a different mindset would help.
Holly? Susan Ley tomorrow. I
Oh,
she's the
Susan
right
Ley,
person to bring the
how
party
powerful.
together. I think her life experiences.
Yeah, I
combined with
think
the fact
she's
that she has
definitely
3 finance
probably one.
degrees,
All
prove she's
the
got not
liberal
only the
insider I
experience, but
know
also the
said that
intellect
he
to be
reckons
able
it's going to be her,
to
and
actually drive
Angus seems to
policy
be
and make sure
tainted
that
by
when
Dutton.
we do
So
get to the next election, we've actually got something to say. Michael.
Well, it's up to the Liberal Party, but I would say that the main thing the Liberal Party has to do is regain their advantage on the economy. That's traditionally been the Liberal strength. They've lost it. And if they don't own the economy, then they're in trouble. I think Angus Taylor is the best credentialed to do that. On the other hand, they also need to show that they've got a broad church, and so Susan Ley would be the woman and the move to the
Now,
centre.
CJ, have you shared the link with your friends?
The economic
yeah, I
agenda
put it in the group chats, and it's on my
Good,
page.
very powerful, very powerful.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, panel.
Let's see
As
what
a
she's gonna
follower
say.
of Politics, I'm bewildered by the dismissal of Ed and Mark, who, from where I sit, seem to be competent and articulate ministers. I'm disappointed as a Labor supporter that the old school factions should still dictate who gets a ministry, and the Prime Minister either unable or unwilling to intervene. Ed, can you enlighten us on what do you think this does to the reputation and credibility of the Labor Party?
And I'll just clarify, when you say Mark, you're talking about Mark Dreyfus, the
Powerful
outgoing
questions,
Attorney
powerful
General, and of course Ed
questions.
Husic's next to me.
Bit
so
of
he's
an easy one for Ed there.
Okay, so where do I start?
That's a bit of a Dorothy Dixon.
Look, the reality is factions have been around since the start of the party. The best way they work is when you.
I'm not sure what he hopes to achieve in his media tour, because that's probably the worst thing you can do to try and regain your career.
The reality is that.
Yeah, true. By the way, CJ, are you talking near? Do you have a mic, or are you talking near your phone? Because I think it's a little bit quiet on your. I mean, it's a little bit muffled on your end.
I'm talking into a webcam, so I can just lean a bit closer.
That's a bit better. That's a bit better.
Doesn't work, or mechanics don't work, and I think they can help manage merit. I think they can moderate ambition, and they also provide an orderly path for renewal.
Would you agree the factions are a path to orderly renewal, CJ?
In the last week,
no, I mean I'm pro like parties having factions, but I think the Labor model of factions is just really toxic because they're so formalized and like it just breeds like the worst kind of like
and when you say people
like at my university, you cannot tell the difference like ideologically between Labor left and Labor right. Like it's purely just a.
Well, yeah, no, I do think it's not really an ideological divide. A lot these days.
Well, we had a lot of calls in my electorate office.
So I think any good party should have like factions, but I think what the Liberals do and what the Greens do, where it's just kind of informal groups, is better.
The party across factions, but
who do you want to be the Greens leader? Marine Faruqi?
As well.
No, I'm all in on Larissa Waters. It's got to be her.
And I work really hard across business.
I mean, realistically, she'd be the only one who's actually got a chance to be popular. If Marine did it, she would be so toxic. You have to admit that, right?
No, I admit that she's I mean, she's all right. I've seen her speak in person, but like.
Change our nation.
To be fair to her, like she's not like she's clearly passionate and she's clearly a competent person, but she's not a great communicator, and that's what the Greens need right now.
You just got to move on.
Well, I think Ed is lived by the factional sword.
We'll talk about this more at length. We'll watch a little bit of the Q&A. We've got 40 live viewers. That's pretty good. Guys, if you're watching on YouTube, remember to hit the like button. It will help us reach more people.
And I think there's a lot of delusion about the final election result. Labor has really been sort of elected on a platform of we're going to borrow a whole lot of money. It's a cost of living crisis. We're going to borrow a lot of money and hand it to people, and people will feel a bit better than that. And they've got no real agenda, no growth agenda.
They really didn't do that much Keynesianism during the
pandemic. To get growth going.
Wait, who are we talking about?
This guy, I don't know, but he seems to be liberal line. He's going on about how Labor is like spending too much to get out of the pandemic, and they don't have a plan now. It's afterwards. But really, I mean, compared to like Biden and other countries, like Labor really didn't do that much stimulus.
What do you reckon? Oh, love from the UK and Hungary, excited for another show. How powerful is it that we've got an international audience? Thanks so much for watching, Soren. Very cool, very cool. We've actually got a pretty good audience on YouTube right now, about 38 live viewers. Guys, if you're watching, smash the like button. I don't know who this bloke is, to be honest. Like, I know a lot. I could probably name like 80% of MPs, but I don't know who this bloke is.
Yeah, I think he's probably media or something.
Wanted to intervene.
Latika is a great theorist of Australian politics.
He has seen fit not to do so. And there's another bunch of people who could have chosen to say that. His own New South Wales right colleagues, they decided not to take the bullet. And Ed Husick is on the record as saying he didn't want to force a factional ballot. So there are ways that Ed Husick...
Con says he's been watching since week one. Thank you, Con.
...to the cabinet could still be in cabinet. But it's
I did see the
actually
new UK immigration policy. It'll be interesting if he follows up with it. I will ask CJ about that because I'm going to be very interested.
Well, I've got to get a reaction from you.
Let's see Ed Husick.
Well, I sort of pick up on what Michael said. I've benefited from the way that factions work, but I'm not. If I can make the point as well, teams have got to be able to work out. Yep, there's always people that want to step forward. We always people that want to have a chance to be in these roles. Sometimes you've got to do what's good for the group, and I've done that myself in times past. Could have easily won ballots, and in 2019 we had the prospect of a former premier sitting on the backbench. I didn't think that was a good move, particularly after a really hard loss in 2019. And I did what I did. I live my values, right? So I'm not saying anything different. But again,
Ed Husic is actually an interesting figure. He's actually Bosnian Muslim, I believe, which is really interesting.
I haven't actually heard of him before all this, so I really don't know.
What do you say?
I actually hadn't heard of him before the drama where he got dropped.
I just knew of him because it's interesting. He's a Bosnian. He's originally Bosnian, and he's like very close friends with a Jewish guy in the Labour Party in the caucus as well. So it's an interesting sort of multicultural mix.
I see a new role for myself, but I do intend to work hard to get support to get back to the front bench because I'd like to play a part. Helping the country I love.
Kate, are you disappointed that the Prime Minister didn't intervene?
I am. I've been a Labor supporter for a long time, and I understand not everybody understands how the factions work and that it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. But at a time when we're in a world that's almost chaotic,
not wrong.
And Ed and Mark Dreyfus, to me, were competent ministers. I'm not saying brilliant, they were competent ministers.
I mean, I don't mind.
That's pretty fucking depressing.
I mean, there are some
lift you up and tear you down.
Yeah, Kate said you're competent.
Good to be competent.
And I've heard you on radio, the stuff you've been doing around AI, like you're thinking about the future. And
Facts.
I can't understand why that's
Madam.
been embraced when we're dealing with a world that's rapidly changing. And I'm just really sad that it just seems to, we'll just move on. Because I think a lot of people just
wanted to quickly, if I could quickly say, I think, look, these things happen. I feel particularly strongly about what happened with Mark. Mark has been a big contributor. He should have been given dignity. There should have been some class extended to Mark, frankly. I feel really bad for the way that he's gone. I think a lot of other people feel that way. And I think if people had just actually taken the time to have a yarn with him and talk it through, maybe.
So Mark Dreyfus was Attorney General. He was the guy who was dropped in favour of the Victorian right?
Hey, it's a bit muffled, CJ. Is there
Wait. So Mark.
Hey, you
there?
Yeah.
Okay. So Mark Dreyfus was the Attorney General, right? And he was dropped in favour of a different Labour right?
Michelle Rowland, I think her name is.
Oh yeah.
And look, it is interesting because Mark Dreyfus was literally like a KC barrister right at the top of the legal profession, and I don't think the person who's succeeded him had anywhere anywhere as good a legal career.
No, I mean, Alvaro's in such a strong position after the election win that he can basically do whatever he wants and no one's going to challenge him.
Let's see what he says.
Previous government who was actually doing stuff. A lot of other people were talking about it, but Ed was actually doing stuff. And I can say this now because the decision's been made, and you won't take the heat from a Green senator saying it, but you were collaborative. You disagreed. We disagreed sometimes, but we worked together, getting
how polite, how thoughtful.
Up. You had the respect of the stakeholders. I just wish Merit had more of a say in these kinds of decisions in politics. That's what I'd like. I'd like Merit to do it.
I mean, I remember making comments about Ed when.
What do you think of Shoebridge?
For Christina Keneally.
I think his foreign policy views are horrible.
I just feel it's unfortunate that when you do.
I mean, he changed a bit when he was advocating for the eco-friendly nuclear missiles.
He did actually say that Drew shouldn't be kicked out of. I don't know if you might not have, this was a couple of years back, but I was walking through Parliament one day. I was actually due to meet with James Patterson and Peter Khalil. I was meeting with them about the bomb threats my family were receiving. And I was in the building and somebody called in a bomb threat against me. And then basically the AFP kicked me out saying Drew's like a known protester or whatever. And then Shoebridge brought me up instead of estimates and said like, this shouldn't have happened to Drew, even though I don't like his views.
I think it provides strength.
Yeah, I hope he becomes deputy leader because he's pretty.
But I do really dislike his political views
on to the table to look at things
like,
from a different perspective and bring those experiences to the table. And I think that provides for stronger.
Yeah, I don't even know who Sam Ray is at this convoy
thing. And also, I've made this point elsewhere. You can't celebrate diversity and then just expect it to say nothing. Right.
Actually, what's he saying? Islamic voices being silenced in government. Hang on, let me put that back a bit.
To the table to look. I think this.
Hang on, let's watch this.
To what extent does the restriction of Islamic voices in federal parliament reflect Australia's stance on the conflict in Gaza?
Powerful question. How powerful? Well said, my friend.
Well, there's others, but it's a really powerful question.
Oh my God, that's what she said.
I think.
Here.
I'm a believer in diversity, not because of its token value, but because I think it provides strength. I think strong decisions get made with strong views, different views being brought to the table to look at things from a different perspective and bring those experiences to the table. And I think that provides for stronger, not weaker government. Debate is not a bad thing. And also, I've made this point elsewhere. You can't celebrate diversity and then just expect it to say nothing, right, around a cabinet table.
Well said, Mr. Husich.
You've got a good point there.
You did, and others. And regardless of faith, what we were seeing on our screens on October 7 and after October 7, what Hamas did, how the Israeli government responded, the deaths that ensued, there's no way in the world I could just sit and not say something. And in particular, I think people were turning to us to see how we would respond. And again, it's not lines of the day, it's a statement of values of whether or not you think this is wrong and whether or not the nation should speak up and whether or not the nation should be part of an international coalition to say, we've got to do better. I'm a firm believer in that. There's no way I would have stayed silent on it. I have spoken up.
How powerful.
And I've been a strong voice on that. And I'm also confident in my great friend in terms of Anne Arley, will bring that to the table as well. I might not be there. Anne will do a terrific job because I've worked with her for many years and I know what her values are.
Mussy, this has obviously been an issue that's really been something you're passionate about. Tell us about your passion for this.
Yeah, because with my family migrating from an Islamic country and turning a bit more into the non-religious kind of belief, we're just thinking like in terms of our government, who can we look up to who like reflects our beliefs and our values in terms of policy?
So full sectarianism, awesome. Goated.
Yeah, well,
we love
I think
it.
when you see
I think that's a bit unfair
against my colleague Marine Faruqi,
but let's see this.
Let's see how hard it's been for Fatima Payman, like really hard for Fatima Payman, and she's
Marine Faruqi,
she says that
very victimized lady,
much more clearly than I can articulate it. You can see how tough it can be down in Canberra.
I actually think we need more sectarianism in
really
Australian politics.
Tough. We try and
That'd
provide
be
as much support as we can.
It would be funny.
I think many people who have seen that play out.
We should definitely have more. I think people want more sectarianism.
And thinking how tough it is. But one thing I heard Ed say then is you can't deal with this like lines for the day. When you see, as our party sees, as millions of Australians sees, you see starvation being used as a weapon of war against a civilian population. Of course, you expect your government to speak out against it and build that international coalition. Of course, we expect that.
We keep it. The government would say that it did strengthen its position on Gaza. Penny Wong played that role, but obviously for some people it wasn't enough.
I mean, this is a diabolical issue for the Labor Party because they're torn at both sides, on their left flank and their right flank. I don't think you could reasonably say, knowing Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese's politics, that they are that divergent from, say, Ed Husick's views, but they are a government. And I think this question is really interesting because
I agree with Dodo. I should be on the panel. Hey,
to
I
form a
mean,
position on this
more
issue.
qualified than some of the
Anyone
people they
who's
got on
not
there.
Islamic could have
Here,
the
here.
same view.
You know, I
as
found this
Husik
book
on
today.
this.
How funny is this,
And so the
CJ?
question then becomes, what's
Oh.
the vote at the cabinet table?
I found this
How much
book. How
has
funny is that?
the Prime Minister or the Foreign
BA
Minister
Santa
allowed
Maria
these
running the
voices to
show.
have a say in the policy making? And if not, why not? Now, if their positions are
Dr.
perfectly
Everett was
defensible, which
robbed.
they might be, that's up to
Hey,
them to
you
explain.
spoke
But
to-
I do really caution at the premise of that question being that only Islamic voices could form one opinion on this or another, or shape that debate at the cabinet table.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. But Matthew, you know,
No, I think
you're
it should only
expressing,
be Islamic
obviously,
voices.
a view
That's just
which
my
I think a lot
opinion.
of young people hold more broadly, Latika. It's right. Is that a reflection of
like
your community?
representing like young people, we do feel a bit overlooked, not really heard. We understand that government is a bit tricky in terms of like holding up different interests, but it would be more like it would be better to see more representation in terms of like standing a bit more firm on issues, like because Islam is the second most practiced religion in the country.
So
And
true.
if we don't see that
We
many
need more
ministers
Islamic
representing
sectarianism.
our issues, that's just to me like
I'm not sure it's
do you see what
sectarianism.
you're
It's just saying,
about
like, I want our
everyone
interests
can
taken
have
into account as
that
well.
kind of everyone can stand up and advocate for an issue.
We need more
But it
Islamic
is those like
representation in the
personal
parliament.
experiences that I feel can really bring
Well,
a
it
bit
is
more
very
of a
close to home for people who have family and connections. There's no doubt about it. Is that true?
Yeah, the
I think we need more. I
said,
think the
October
government
7
should
was
be an
a
Islamic
horrific
theocracy.
terrorist attack on the state of Israel, and what you see every night happening in
Inshallah, brother.
in Gaza now is a
Yeah.
horrific thing too. It's hard for us to all get our heads around it. I
Do you
think
want to go
what
to
also
like
happened, of
the
course, and it's
more
a
casual
pity that
chat
it's
now
part
instead of the
actually-
Q&A?
Yeah. Okay. We can just chat now. Let me bring up your Twitter and I'll put that on the screen while we chat. But
The
that
greatest
was look. I do want to say that I think that was a really powerful discussion. I did really like the fact that he said there should be more sort of Islamic sectarianism in the Australian government. I think that's an epic sort of thing to look for. What do you think, CJ?
I'm not sure I see it that way. I mean, that guy seemed like pretty reasonable. Just felt like he wasn't being heard. I mean, Ed Husick. He seems like kind of like an okay guy, but like
No, I'm fine with Ed Husic. This is the funny thing, right? Like, I don't see Ed Husic as a sectarian guy at all. I think, like, I would actually like. This is the funny thing, right? Like, when I say like I don't like Islamic sectarianism, when I say that, I'm not talking about like just any like. I think Ed Husic is like fine. Like, he's not a sectarian guy at all. I'm talking more. I think Fatima Payman is like legitimately a sectarian type figure. I think Marine Faruqi is a sectarian figure. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm probably more familiar with Payman than Faruqi just because she's got more media coverage, to be honest. But like,
yeah, okay. What's your thoughts on Fatima Payman? Let's go on that.
I mean, probably one of the greatest fumbles of Australian politics is Australia's voice. Just absolute. David Pocock I'm in the ACT. David Pocock got more first preference votes.
Let me say, even though I'm very much against Fatima Payman, but to be honest, she actually got, I think, almost close to 1% nationally, which is like, I know that's not lots, but like the fact that she did get that from, despite the fact that she doesn't have any volunteers or anything, it is like kind of significant, I guess. I don't know, it could have been a lot worse. Like I'm saying, like obviously I did worse when I ran.
No, well, maybe we can get the Drew Pavlou Democratic Alliance back one day. But
yeah,
I mean, obviously, the thing she said about Iran was really stupid. But like,
I mean, that was a disaster. I mean,
I don't really see that as like a reflection of her values, and more just her being like saying what she thinks people want to hear. But she's definitely not like, she's young and she's clearly not like the most shrewd politician. And I think like, honestly, she should have just joined the Greens or something if this was the plan, because her party is just, yeah.
To be honest, it is actually interesting that she didn't join the Greens, because she would definitely have a lot more chance like getting back in if she had joined the Greens. Elected at the next election.
Oh, you're back. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you dropped out. Anyway.
Yeah, because she's got 3 years left on her term, and then she's going to be up at the next one. Like, if she had gone for the Greens, like she would actually have probably a pretty good chance of getting returned. Although, who's going to be the Green Senate candidate at the next one in WA? Would that be I think it's an Indigenous Australian senator in Western Australia for the Greens. I mean, maybe she would be.
Let me look it up. It's Jordan Steele John. Oh, it's Jordan Steele John and during the
Okay.
COP.
I mean, yeah, she never would have been pre-selected above Jordan Steele John, obviously. But
Well, yeah, if she went with the Greens, she'd have to fight for a second Green Senate spot, which would be pretty tough. But like, so is running as basically like an independent. So I think
yeah,
she's
I mean,
kind of screwed either way.
she probably would have more. She'd probably have more chance with the Greens than being a full independent.
Honestly, maybe if she pushed like her sort of weird WA regional interest thing, but like within the Greens, then maybe she would have done better. But I mean, what's done is done now.
I mean, I know it is strange. I mean, she's tried to do. You're right. Like she's tried to do like WA separatism and stuff like that, and regionalism, and like I think she is like actually just bad at politics.
Yeah, I mean, I like her. She seems like a good like she's like the type of MP who I'm like, yeah, I'd love to have her in the Socialist Party one day. But like as a political leader, she has not had the best instincts. It's been clear.
Because I know she tried to do a bit of Western Australian sectarianism and stuff like that. And then she pivoted.
I mean, the coalition that she tried to put together is like WA regionalists, is like Islamic sort of interests, like the Islamic vote, and then also like young people who are like progressive but not progressive enough for the Greens.
It's pretty amazing. And well, you know what that is? That's literally like Glenn Drury. Like that's just like Glenn Drury.
Yeah, that's the Glenn Drury fort right there, or lack thereof.
Wait, which ones? Oh, Braden will join. Are you friends with Braden?
Yeah, we're friendly. Yeah, we chat. And
okay, stuff. Should I add Braden to the chat and it could just be like 2 Greens against Drew?
Sure.
Okay. I'll send it to Braden. Or I'm not sure. Actually, I'm not sure if I've got him to send it to. Hang on. If I can't message him, you can message it to him. Maybe I can send you the link to send to him. I'm gonna just
try. Send it to me. What? Can I just use the same one?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just the same one. Okay. Yeah, try send the same one that I sent you and put him on.
Okay, Braden, if you're watching, it's been sent through.
Beautiful. No, we'll get him on. We'll get it on. What's his name again? It's like Bantis Braden or whatever. How do I find it? Bantis.
Just BA. Yeah.
Braden. Hang on. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, I can't message it to him because I don't have the thing, but you send it to him. Hopefully that will work.
Yeah, I've sent it.
Okay, you got to admit, it's pretty cope to be celebrating Ryan right now. Like it's like,
I mean,
it's like the worst. It's like the worst possible outcome, surely.
I mean, yeah, like the Brisbane seats, like, yeah, I mean, when the Liberal vote collapses that much, there's not much you can do. But like losing Melbourne is just inexcusable.
It is actually strange to me because like I thought that there was a chance that they'd lose the Brisbane seats, but I was actually so shocked that Melbourne fell.
I mean, no one saw Melbourne. I was looking at the betting odds, and it was like if you bet on Greens Melbourne, you'll get like 4 cents back for every dollar. But
I know, and like it's fucking weird because imagine telling someone before the election like the last remaining Green seat in the House would be like Libby Watson-Brown in Ryan. Like that's so strange.
Yeah, I would not have believed you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that. Someone goes, was CJ debating before? I mean, we haven't really gotten into a debate yet. We're just like sort of chatting shit. But we can when Braden joins in, we can just okay. Like, I mean, here's a good one. Why no nuclear energy? Like, I saw someone before saying like, you know, we shouldn't have nuclear energy. Ask why about nuclear. So yeah, why are your thoughts on nuclear?
I mean, I don't have that strong views on nuclear. Like I'd feel like that's like pretty much just like a basic policy. Does this work or not? Like that's not really an ideological thing. But I mean, the argument I hear against nuclear is it takes like 20 years to build, and in that time, renewable energy will be good enough that it really wasn't worth it.
I actually respect those types of arguments against nuclear. I respect that a lot more than the sort of David Shoebridge, because I remember David Shoebridge going like, oh, like they want to put a Chernobyl in your fucking backyard. Like that was obvious.
Oh yeah,
that was
the reflective anti-nuclear stuff is like a holdover from the New Left is pretty annoying.
And it's like a NIMBY thing as well.
Yeah, I think the nuclear ship has sailed though, as far as like it would have been a good idea to build in the 90s, but now like.
Well, the sad thing is that unfortunately the left were the ones that were blocking in the 90s. But yeah, I get you. Like, Look, I think maybe Dutton just fucked up the way he presented it. Like maybe if he had just said, we'll do one test reactor first, maybe that would have been harder for them to. Obviously, Labor ran a huge scare campaign against it and saying $600 billion. Maybe if Dutton had just said, we'll do one test reactor. But obviously,
Well, I don't
Dutton ran
I don't really think he intended to go through with it. I think it was mostly just like a last-ditch attempt to be like, we don't need renewable energy, we can just do this. And obviously it didn't work.
Because, I mean, my problem, right, is that I actually like nuclear, but I don't like Dutton. So I was like in a tough space because I could tell, like, obviously his policy wasn't planned and everything, which is stupid. But the general principle of having, you know, at least trying nuclear energy, I support. But yeah, has Braden responded yet? I've sent him the link. Yeah, if you send the link.
I said, what the fuck is this? I'll say, you click on it.
Yeah, just click on it and then join.
You click on it, join the stream. Wait.
Yeah, this is a good question. Would you support lifting the ban though? Because there is a like. There's
it would be so politically unpopular, and I feel like the practical benefits wouldn't be there.
But there's a difference. There's a difference between lifting the ban on nuclear energy, because right now it's actually banned, and just you. I mean, you could lift the ban. Doesn't mean you're going to necessarily have to go ahead with it. Like you could just say we're going to lift the ban and then see if there, you know, and then we can see if, for example, there are people in the economy who might want to fund it.
I mean, sure, maybe. I think just like it's so unpopular just because people are so associated with like Fukushima for Chernobyl, even if like it's like much safer now. That I just think the nuclear ship has sailed. Like,
look, at least I can respect that you're not doing the stupid NIMBY David Shoebridge, like, oh wow, like they literally want to put like a Chernobyl in your fucking backyard. Like, like at least if we're talking about the actual policy, whether it's like whether it actually works, I mean, that's better than just like the reflexive NIMBYism. Okay, here's another question, right? Like, it's pretty undeniable that like NIMBYism has like stalked the Greens, right, for like the past 10 years. Do you think that plays a part in the backlash we saw, you know, last week against the Greens?
I mean, the Greens are they're most popular when they're NIMBY, so I don't think that. I mean, the general public is quite NIMBY, so I don't think that like people will say like, oh, it was Gaza, oh, it was housing. I think housing, like the blocking, like being framed as like blockers, not builders or whatever. I think that was a much bigger role. I think Gaza was probably like a net zero, and like we lose some more Zionist-leaning Jews, we gain some more sympathetic Muslims.
We've got Braden here. I'm going to add Braden on. Braden, hello. Braden, are you going to do video or just do what? Are you just going to do what CJ's doing and no face?
Yeah.
You can put on video.
Yeah,
put on video. It'll be better.
Yeah, I mean, I usually have a Palestinian flag up in the background.
You can put I'm not gonna like shut down the stream if you've got a Palestinian
flag. But I wish I had it for this stream specifically.
I mean, you can literally put one up.
I don't put on chat. I haven't shaved and put on cam. I mean.
Okay. Okay, Braden, we've got two. We've got two Socialist Green members up at the moment. We're chatting, we're discussing, we're debating. Now, Braden, what explains the major backlash that the Greens faced last week in the election? What explains it? How do you sum it up?
I feel like a lot of things. I mean, I think that it's difficult. I mean, I've still got to talk to people about exactly what the post-mortem is going to be. In Brisbane, these results basically couldn't have been helped, at least the fact that those seats went Labor. I mean, when the swing was that big from LNP to Labor, like even if Max had gained like 5% of the vote or something from last time, he still would have lost. Like it was, you know, kind of LNP fumble, and then at least in those seats. In terms of what Melbourne and like, I don't know what the hell happened in Melbourne.
Can I say one thing? So I want to say one thing. There is a common narrative that I've seen from Australian Green supporters, and they've said, well, it's not necessarily a backlash against the Greens itself. It's because the Labor Party received such a big swing towards it, therefore we got swamped. And I mean, there's something to be said for that. But at the same time, Max Mather literally received, like his primary he had a swing against him on his own primary vote. His primary vote was 2% down from where it was last time. So do you think, like, what explains that for you?
Probably like, I mean, I think there were probably like elements of, you know, certain controversial issues. I don't think Gaza, actually. I didn't get Gaza that much at all. I more got CFMEU actually more often. But
do you actually think, would you say though that the way the Greens treated the issue of Gaza, though, do you think that has been endorsed by the Australian people though at this election?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that the swings away were because of Gaza, and I think that you saw swings too because of Gaza. We got record high, you know, Senate votes in a lot of places in Western Sydney.
I think Gaza wasn't an issue for the vast majority of voters in this election.
I was swinging more people on by bringing up Gaza than I got people coming at me with negativity about Gaza. Look, there's controversial positions that we've made that I think probably did lose us support, but that I still think we should have taken. Like, for example, CFMEU. I think that was brilliant. CFMEU.
Absolutely.
It was
what's your thinking on that?
I don't think Gaza is that.
Okay, how do you... So you admit that you lost votes on the CFMEU issue, but you still think it was overall worth it. What's your thinking there? Why do you say that?
Because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I'd rather lose every single seat in Parliament than have my representatives vote to crush a union.
And it wasn't even like that we lost every single rep. You know, we kept all our senators.
So CJ, explain your thought where you say you'd rather lose every seat in Parliament than crush a union, because like clearly, if you lose every single seat in Parliament, you're done. I mean, and we're not just talking Greens here. Like, you would presumably extend that principle to the Labor Party. So you're basically saying Labor Party should have 0 seats in Parliament rather than crush a party. Is it really worth it to completely destroy the entire parliamentary representation of, like, you know, the working classes and middle classes in this country over, you know, one militant union?
Well, I mean, if you're voting to crush a union like that, then you've already ceased to be a party that represents the interests of the union movement and the workers' movement. So, I mean, obviously, I'm being a bit hyperbolic, but like,
I mean, is that really true though? Because I mean, you say, okay, you've already lost the whole point of being a workers' party, etc. But is it really the case that the CFMEU is the, you know, sole embodiment of like the sort of like zeitgeist of workers in this country, right? Like, I mean, is the CFMEU really representative of the working class in this country? I mean, you look at the majority of working class unionists these days, and it's middle-aged women in the nursing industry and aged care and all these sorts of things. So, I mean, is the militancy of the CFMEU really that representative of the working class and the union movement in this country?
I'll let Braden go.
Talk to any teacher or nurse, and they will probably tell you that they would like their union to be more militant, or more active in fighting for their rights. I think while obviously the majority of unionized workers aren't in the CFMEU, the advocacy, the kind of comparative and relative strength that the CFMEU stands for its workers in a lot of instances.
Let me ask you this. If there was this, I mean, you're portraying it as though there's this big appetite in Australian society for a more militant workers movement, a more militant union movement. If that's the case, why has there been a general decline in union membership for so many decades? And why is it the case that basically every single time there's a strike, people just go apoplectic? Even working class people, even middle class people, don't enjoy this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a big part of the decline of the union movement has been like sort of the bureaucratization. Like, if you look at the people who are running the unions now, barely any of them come from the shop floor. They come from young labor. And as for like, so I mean, a part of the decline of the union movement is I think that people don't really see the need for like to join a union, especially since we have the Fair Work Commission. We negotiate awards on an industrial scale. Like, there's no real direct benefit that you can see directly from being in a union unless you actively like organize and go on strike. So that's the one part, is there's just not as much benefit to being in a union when we have the award system and we're putting everyone on basically like.
Again, though, can I ask? So you've got these unions that are more aligned with like sort of like the Socialists and the Greens. Like, they explicitly reject the kind of like, you know, accrediting system with Labor Party. So, for example, RAFU, etc. these unions do exist. Why is it the case that they have not, expanded and exploded in membership, etc.?
Well, I think RAFU's been doing pretty well for a union that's not registered, but I think also like if a union is not registered, it's not really a good question to ask why it's not doing well. It's because it's not registered. It's not an actual union legally. So, I mean, I think that I'm opposed to forming I think RAFU is somewhat defensible because the SDA is just that bad, but I'm generally opposed to forming like breakaway unions. I think we should work within the currently existing unions to try and bring rank and file democracy to them rather than forming breakaway unions that try and work outside of the Australian legal system.
Now, tell me, what is the line for you when it comes to, say, like union militancy? At what point do you think people in the Australian electorate or the Australian community would say this is a line that we won't cross? So, for example, you look at the actions of the union movement in Britain in the late 70s, and leading into the sort of Reagan Thatcher leading into the Thatcher counter revolution. You had long-term strikes in Britain. It was causing economic chaos. There was high inflation. There was stagflation. There was, there were days on days where people wouldn't have energy and power in the UK, and this contributed to the rise of these neoliberal right-wing politicians as a backlash, right? So I'm asking, right, tactically and strategically, at what point do you think union militancy and a more radical kind of left-wing union movement, at what point can it actually be counterproductive for the left?
Do you want to answer, Braden, or I can answer otherwise?
You go ahead.
All right. Well, I think yes, obviously, like the stagflation did play a part in like sort of the rise of neoliberalism, but I think that was kind of like inevitable. Like it's not really like the unions are there to represent workers' interests, the sort of New Deal, well, not New Deal in Britain, but this sort of welfare state was like just becoming unsustainable just because profitability wasn't there. So like I don't think it's reasonable to say like, oh, if these unions had just been less militant, then maybe we wouldn't have had Thatcher. I think it's more like, well, the unions were going to be militant because there was such a backlash from Thatcher and from the capital class.
Even like that, there were, it was like the years of discontent in Britain. This was before Thatcher, right? Where there were like, there was a Labour government. They were struggling to deal with militancy in the movement. Like some of these unions had been captured basically by Trotskyists, etc. There were rolling strikes. There was mass economic disruption. So at what point do you think, mass economic disruption from striking and everything can actually be detrimental for the left?
I'm kind of an absolutist. I think when it comes to unions, like whatever you can get, you should push for. But as far as like a strategic view, then it's hard to say like, is blocking a road for like a protest worth it, even though it will piss off all the people trying to get to work. So it's like,
that's a good question as well. The Greens have been quite supportive of those types of very disruptive protests. And the funny thing is, 4 or 5 years ago, I was a Greenie and I was way more disruptive protesters, etc. I moved away from it because I thought it was all completely. I eventually decided, this just pisses people off. It doesn't actually build any support in the community, etc. Like it's just like, so. What do you think on those types of disruptive protests? Like the kind of people who lock onto the roads and they're blocking traffic, etc. Do you really think it's the Greens should support actions like that?
I don't really think it's a case of should we support or should we not. I think in some cases it's worth it, in other cases it's not. And how do you find that line? Well, trial and error. But sometimes like the point of a protest is to be disruptive. Sometimes you have to do something that's like immediately unpopular to make a point.
Also, this is the thing I get. I think that this is pushed by people like usually, people that have never been to a protest, because the thing is, every protest blocks a road. Like if even the approved ones with marches, you'll go by cars stopped that the cops have stopped for you to get to protest, to go. And in fact, those often will block roads for longer. Like approved protests will block roads for way longer than unapproved ones because they remove them fairly quickly. I don't think that it's that. I don't know. I just don't think it's that big of a deal, especially if you're protesting something that's like genuinely, is a massive issue like the climate change or genocide.
Let me ask you this. What issues do the Greens need to moderate on as a result to win back support from the Australian community? So none. They should be more left wing. Do you think it would actually be successful if the Greens ran even more to the left of the next election?
I think I disagree with Braden here.
I think that this was not a great result. Obviously, it's a disappointing result. I don't think we should change our principles or our policies.
The postals, we can still wait for the postals, right, Braden?
Yeah, we'll still wait for the absentees as well.
The postal counter-attack will save us.
Stop the steal. But yeah, sorry. Continue.
I think that ultimately, I don't view electoralism or electoral politics as, we need to now change to suit the opinions that have been expressed at an election. It's we need to stand firm in what we believe and try and convince the people of what we do believe. I don't think that we need to be trying to match ideologies, go closer to Labor and offer less of an alternative, less of a real alternative. I think instead we need to look at, okay, well, obviously our ideas didn't hit as much as we wanted them to this time. How can we frame them better? How can we, what issues do people care about that we can emphasize more or less? I don't think these changing policies opportunistically is the way to go, because then you just go down the road of Labor. You go down the road of moderation and moderation and moderation.
I disagree with Braden somewhat, so if I could go.
Okay, you go, CJ.
Yeah, so I think Braden's right. I think our policies are fine, and I'm not sure we need to moderate on those. I think it's mostly an issue of messaging and organization. So I think that so for example, with the blocking stuff, if you can go to Labor and say, hey, we'll pass this bill if you make this amendment, and you can go to your voters and say, hey, we've got this amendment for you, then that's a good thing. But if you're demanding things that you know that Labor will never, ever, ever accept, like a national rent freeze or to take over the RBA, then you're purely doing a media stunt, and the media is not going to side with you. So I think when it comes to negotiating with Labor, we do need to realize that the goal of a negotiation is to get concessions, and we can't just demand
okay, Braden, it looks like Braden has a disagreement. What are you thinking, Braden?
I do disagree with that. Okay. I think that specifically with the rent freeze, look, the RBA thing. See, the thing is, I think that when we do block, we have to push hard and sell our point well. I don't think because the thing is, the point of the block, I don't think is just for concessions. I think it is for driving the discourse left, exposing Labor.
Did that work though? Here's the thing though. Did that work though?
Can't drive, the media is so against you when you do that you really can't drive the discourse left, I think.
I was in... CJ was still a Labor member at the time. I was in the Greens back when the HAF was happening. And that was, that I can tell you, we did essentially what we did when the HAF happened to pressure Labor to concede, but also to drive the discourse left. We went to Labor electorates and door-knocked their doors to essentially say why, to basically ask people, tell them what the HAF was, tell them why we had issues with it, and then ask them what they thought of various aspects of the HAF. The thing is, I never had more swinging, radicalizing conversations with Labor supporters than during the HAF.
Where were these people? But where were these people at this election, though? That's the thing, Braden. You keep saying
it was 2 years ago. People don't have.
I mean, but that's just right. So you're saying our strategy's working to block. We're radicalizing Labor voters. It's doing really well.
After the HAF, we didn't block. That was ages ago. And then we folded on Help to Buy. We folded on Help to Buy. We folded on Build to Rent.
Can I ask you, right? Do you actually think that if so you're calling it a folding, right? You're saying the Greens capitulated on that issue. Do you really think if they had just held it up even further for another year, do you really think that would have endeared them more to the Australian people?
I don't think so. I think that we would have had to. I don't know what the ideal strategy with either of those bills were, but holding it up for a few months and then passing it, either pass it immediately or just go and or go all the way, vote it down. I mean, Help to Buy was something that we said would make the housing crisis worse. And then build to rent was literally just like a tax break for property investors. Like there was no, like, neither of them were really like stunning pieces of legislation. We could have tried to do a half type thing on it. I just don't think. I also, by the way, I will note, you say, I will quickly say, you say, where were these voters at this election? I actually do think that that it was maybe a tactical miscalculation, because we didn't door knock for the half in our own electorates. So we door knocked for the half in places like Richmond, which saw an increase in Greens vote, Moreton, which also saw an increase in Greens vote.
Moreton was barely an increase. Moreton wasn't even a 1%.
Barely an increase, but compared to Griffith, which is just north of it, the vote held as opposed to Griffith, where it didn't. And then I think that...
Can I say, I'm looking at the Greens primary in Moreton now. It improved by 0.6%.
Yeah, well, compared to Griffith, which went backwards by like 2.5.
Yeah, true. But I mean, that's another interesting one, right? Moreton, you guys had a lot of campaigners out there, a lot of volunteers. You were going really hard, pushing to the Islamic community. My argument would be that it was quite sectarian how you were treating this issue. And you were pushing very hard in Moreton, but just a 0.6% increase to the primary vote. And that was not, that was not my guess. I actually thought that the Greens were going to get, I'm no fan of, the Greens. I'm no fan of Rima, the candidate in Moreton. I wasn't a fan of the strategy that they were doing. But I thought, based on what I could see on the ground, I was driving I'd drive through the area and I'd see the signs everywhere. I thought for sure they're going to get like a 5% increase. I actually thought it was going to be a lot closer than it would be. And it wasn't. So what's the explanation there? Like, do you think that there was a sectarianism to the Greens' effort that has been rejected by the Australian people?
I don't know what exactly went on in Moreton. I mean, I can say that, while Rima was a fantastic candidate, potentially the single best candidate I think that we might have ever run, to my knowledge, in any election.
Ever run, but she didn't win. She got a 0.6%.
She didn't win. I will also say that she was at a bit of a disadvantage in terms of resourcing when we had 3 incumbents that we were very
She had a lot of volunteers.
Pardon?
She had a huge volunteer ground campaign.
Regarding the swing,
she mobilized a lot of volunteers, and that was off of the strength of her candidacy and her platform. But my question is, why was that? Undoubtedly, my question is right with that on the ground campaign, because I remember seeing the Max Schiller-Mather video, and I know, like, I don't want to like kick you when you're down. Like, it's obviously like pretty funny at this point, but he was saying, like, we've got the 18-year plan for Greens government. I'm not gonna like rub the salt in too much, but
the plan is still in play. It's still happening.
Yeah, it's true, so true. But his argument, right, was in the past when we've door knocked X amount of homes, we've seen this increase to the Greens vote, and this will just keep on happening it will just keep on happening exponentially into the future if we can hit. And eventually the plan was by 2040 or whatever to hit X amount of doors, like door knock 10 million people, win, like literally form a government. Like Max Schiller-Mather had a big door knocking campaign. Rima had a huge on the ground campaign. There was a massive,
not as big as Griffith. No, it isn't.
Sure, but this is a question though, right? Like, there was a really big Greens on the ground campaign in these Brisbane electorates. And, again, driving through Griffith on election day, I could see Greens. There were it looked like Greens volunteers were actually outnumbering Labor in a lot of places, right? Why is it the case that this, according to Max Schiller-Mather, hitting X amount of doors was going to lead to X amount of votes? And, it was just as simple of every 10 conversations or whatever you convert a vote. But why is this not happening for you guys? Why did the ground game not work? You had the best ground game. Let me say, can I say one thing? Sorry, I know I've been talking about. I do think you guys actually have the best ground game, probably right up there with the best ground game in Australian politics. So why is this not actually translating to votes?
I mean, I think that we can still make our ground campaign bigger. But also, I think that it's only one piece of the puzzle, right? So much of it is to do with media. So much of it is to do with so many other avenues, battlegrounds where a campaign is fought on. and you can't. I mean, I know Jono Sriranganathan, our mayoral candidate at the last election, former councillor for the Gabba. To paraphrase him in one of his blog posts, I think it was something along the lines of, we can't just keep acting like 1 5-minute conversation per election cycle is going to by itself win an election. Door knocking is incredibly important, but when you really break it down like that, when you look at it like that, it's only one piece of the puzzle. It's a very important piece, and when you've got a grassroots campaign like we do, and without much money behind it, it is one of the most important pieces. But it's only one side of it, and we were under some pretty well-funded attack this election. I know Advance has been doing their victory lap in the last week or so.
I don't think it was Advance though. I think honestly it wasn't Advance though.
Yeah, I don't know, but it wasn't just like, I mean, Drew, you're in Brisbane, so like you would know it wasn't just Advance. It was Better Australia. It was Australians for Prosperity, and all of them had millions of dollars each to play with, and that was, I mean, it certainly would have done something.
But at the same time, though, like, you would expect if the problem was that there were all these right-wing groups attacking the Greens, you would expect that there would be an increase of the right-wing vote. But in all these seats, it was actually people switching directly from Greens to Labor.
But that doesn't follow if you actually saw what Advance was pushing. Sure, Advance had an anti-Labor campaign, but they didn't run those in Green seats. The Advance's Greens material, Better Australia's Greens material, Australians for Prosperity Greens material, those were all just anti-Green. There was no kind of pro-liberal or anti-Labor slant to these. The only one I will say, there was a flyer in that went out from Advance that was like a joint Greens Labor attack flyer, but that was my only exposure to anything. The YouTube ads, the billboards, 99% of the flyers all were just bashing the Greens.
Can I ask you? Mm-hmm. But according to the sort of Max Schindler-Mather theory from like 2019, mm-hmm. like mm-hmm. they like, because you guys knew even in 2019, right? You guys knew that you had a hostile media. You were talking about you were going up against the corporate oligopoly, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. So the one thing we have is the ground game, and you guys have the ground game, but it actually didn't translate to votes. And so my question is it just the case that your policies are not popular with the Australian people?
Oh, that's not that isn't it. I can tell you that. Well, it depends on the policy that you're talking about, but the flagship ones, I mean, dental into Medicare. I mean,
yeah, like, sure. I mean, those are popular, but do people really think of dental into Medicare when they think of the Greens, or do they think of just the entire vibe of the campaign, the vibe of the party?
I mean, everyone very heard dental into Medicare. We had billboards. We had like every flyer right? Holding out flyers was saying dental into Medicare.
Let me give you an example. Can I say one thing? Listen, yeah. I'm somebody who actually personally supports putting dental into Medicare. But when I look at the Greens Party, I'm not thinking, oh, these guys support dental into Medicare. I'm looking at them and I'm like, these guys are institutionally anti-Semitic. These guys are increasingly radical. These guys
nobody thinks that. Like,
okay, tell me why.
1% of the population thinks it's like
okay.
People think.
Tell me why the Greens are not. Tell me why the Greens are not institutionally anti-Semitic.
Oh, we're on this now, are we?
Well, we've got to cover it. We're in the chat. We've got to cover it. So tell me why you think it's not anti-Semitic. Because, for example, you had Jenny Leong talking about the tentacles of Zionist influence,
which she apologized for.
Yeah, I know, but it's still okay. Would you be happy with a liberal? If a liberal candidate said that, would you be happy with it? Oh, they apologized for it, so it's fine. If a liberal party policy,
if they said exactly what Jenny Leong said, and the thing is, Jenny Leong has a long history of advocating against racism.
So true. But people, but like, can I say, right? Instead of looking at the Greens and being like, oh, these guys want to put dental into Medicare, I think a lot of people look at the Greens and they look at Marian Faruqi going like, I hate Australia, basically.
Oh, that's more accurate than the anti-Semitism stuff. I mean, Advance was really pushing on the Australia Day stuff, but
do you
that's
think,
just like that's again. We've got to keep going. We just
changed on that though. Like Adam Bant made an Anzac Day post and he got shit for it from like the far left, but like it was a good post and people seem to like it.
Can I
So
say,
we were
right?
kind of pivoting.
Even putting the Australia Day issue to the side, right? Because I'm not ever expecting the Australia Day. I'm never expecting the Greens to embrace Australia Day or whatever. So putting that to the side, was it a smart idea, for example, for Bant to go, I'm not going to put the Australian flag behind me at press conference. It'll just be the Torres Strait and Aboriginal flags. Is that a smart idea?
I don't know if it was the right move electorally, but it was the right move morally, and I think it shifted the discourse.
Why is that morally?
A lot of people talk.
So why is that morally? Why is that morally right to not display the flag of your country that you're trying to represent?
Colonial. It's the colonial flag. I mean, it's the flag. It's got the Union Jack on it. Like it's still got the flag of the colonial masters that colonized Indigenous Australia.
Dude, if you ask the Australian people, 90% of people are probably going to disagree with you on that. People like, do you really think? How can you ask people? How can you ask people to elect you to represent Australians in Parliament if you won't even have the flag behind you?
Well, I think this is one of those issues where it's just principle over like short term.
What's the principle? What actually is the principle? Like, what do you want to see eventually happen by not putting out the Australian flag behind Bant?
Well, I think that there needs to be a genuine reckoning with colonial history in Australia. There needs to be truth and
so by Bant doing that, there's going to be a reckoning. Like,
well, because I think the flag is part of the reckoning. The flag is an ever-present symbol of our past and of the
so you want the flag changed
and the colonization that happened in our past.
So to be clear, you want to change the flag?
Yeah, I want to change the flag. I think that's. I don't even think that's particularly controversial among like Labor people to say you want to change the flag.
No, dude. The Labor Party has the Australian flag in its logo. Like we're not. Like it's not mainstream.
Like if you go, like any Labor hack on Twitter is probably like pro the golden waddle or something. Like.
Yeah, but Labor hacks on Twitter are like not representative of like the 5 million people who vote for Labor.
I meant politically engaged people, but you know.
But again, like this comes back to the same problem, right, Brent? Like probably half the people who vote Greens don't want to change the flag, right? It's the difference between the politically engaged activist class and the actual voters themselves. And I'm saying, are you just choosing to do things that just needlessly alienate the public, right? Because if you just had a campaign that was just dental into Medicare, I like dental into Medicare, but you also want to say, no, Australia shouldn't exist as a nation state.
Do we say that though?
I mean, a lot of you guys push right up to that point. I mean, you've got Greens candidates saying that.
State, I guess.
I mean, but there are Greens candidates. There are Greens candidates who, can I say that there are Greens candidates who say that the Australian Parliament is an illegitimate colonial institution. So how can you expect people? Okay, so the Australian Parliament is an illegitimate colonial institution. It shouldn't exist.
No, there's a I guess this is a bit of a semantic difference, but the fact is that sovereignty was never ceded, and there still isn't a treaty in this country. That doesn't mean that
where do we get
that doesn't follow. That doesn't follow. There needs to be.
Parliament's illegitimate. You're saying Parliament's illegitimate. If it's illegitimate, how can it exist?
It's like if CJ or I said that you know capitalism and private ownership is illegitimate, and you said, oh, so you want to like destroy all factories. It's like
No, but if you said that capitalism is illegitimate, it would follow reasonably for me to say, okay, so you want to abolish capitalism.
Yeah. I mean, in that.
So by the same virtue,
privately owned factories. If we say privately owned factories illegitimate, it's like no, actually, there needs to be a change in the character of the institution. And the thing is that there needs to be, because sovereignty was never ceded, we need to correct that mistake so that there can be some legitimacy in Australian institutions. That doesn't mean necessarily we need to turn everything down and start all over again.
Okay, so the Australian legal system, the Parliament, the entire structure of the country is illegitimate until there's a treaty.
I mean, I'm no Indigenous scholar, but I think that's in principle, that's a fair thing to say, I would say.
Well, does it matter what we say is legitimate or not? They have the guns, like.
Exactly.
But I'm saying if the country is not morally legitimate, then it seems if you're saying that the country is not morally legitimate, it seems to a lot of people, and when you couple that idea with let's cut defense spending in half as well, it seems to a lot of people that you just hate the country. I mean, right? Don't you think?
I'm not sure many voters are voting based on defense spending.
What do you say, CJ?
I'm not sure many voters are thinking about defense spending when they cast their vote, to be honest.
Bro, no, but like in Mitchelton and Inogra, right next to the army base, it was hell. But go on.
But like if your overall thing, right, is the Australian Parliament is illegitimate. Australia is illegitimate colonial entity. The country itself is illegitimate, and we want to cut defense spending in half. We want to rip up all our international alliances because it's Western colonialism and stuff like that. It just looks to people like you want to dismantle everything about Australia.
That I don't want to dismantle everything about Australia. I don't think the Greens do either.
So what would? Okay, so if you don't want to dismantle everything about Australia, why go forward and make these really radical, expansive statements like saying Parliament is illegitimate itself? Because to say something's illegitimate, you're basically saying it shouldn't exist.
Well, you're talking about one candidate. You're not talking about
you should legitimize
about one candidate.
It's not just one candidate. Like this is pretty common. Like this is pretty common rhetoric among so many Greens activists, so many different Greens politicians, Greens candidates. Like this is pretty mainstream within the Greens party.
You're missing the entire the words coming out of my mouth. It's that I don't want to destroy all these institutions that you're saying. I'm saying that we have to legitimize them. If they're illegitimate and built on,
why not say that then? Why not change your rhetoric from being about what Australia is? Why not change your rhetoric so that it's less radical? It's less scary for people? Because when you say Australia's Parliament is illegitimate,
I ran for Currumbin. I didn't say Australia was illegitimate. I didn't use those words. I'm defending that statement because you brought it up, and I think that it is in principle a fair thing to say. Now, I think that it can be a fair thing to say for people, and maybe it isn't the best electorally to say. Maybe MPs could choose different words, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to clutch my pearls over a statement that I ultimately agree with. But I think
that's what I was saying. You do agree with it at the end of the day.
Yeah, as I've explained.
So would you say potentially the Greens have a problem with patriotism? Like if the Greens were a bit more patriotic, a bit more supportive of Australia as a country, do you think you could win more votes?
I mean, maybe, but that's another thing where it's like I don't think that that's principally what.
So you'd prefer to lose. You'd prefer to have less votes as long as you're not patriotic.
It depends. What do you mean by patriotic? Because that feeds into nationalism very quickly.
So okay, what's your stance overall when it comes to nationalism?
I mean, it's an impulse that has led to a whole host of terrible things, and I think it should be in broad terms.
You can say that, but there's obviously different types of nationalism, right? Like there's obviously, we would all say like ethnic nationalism, which is based on race and blood and soil and stuff like that. That's obviously very problematic. But when we're talking about, say, civic nationalism, just the concept that Australia should exist as a nation state, like, is that really going to lead to World War II?
I don't think that is necessarily, though, kind of the idea that Australia should exist. I don't think. Maybe anarchists would say that, but I don't think that can be nationalism. At least
I remember. Can I say? I remember when I talked to John O'Shea, he did say that he thinks that Australia as a nation state should be abolished. Like he wants it to basically. He doesn't think there should be a federal government. He thinks it should just be like local communities. Like it's got an anarcho-communist vision.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you think that is the type of thing that is potentially pushing Greens voters away? Because if it was just a campaign based on dental into Medicare and taxing billionaires and stuff, that's probably pretty popular. But it's that other stuff that when it goes much further, where it's like, we don't agree with the actual idea of Australia existing as a country. Do you think that's what's killing you a bit? Because I think that's what's killing the Greens.
I mean, I don't think people knew that, though. I don't think people knew that Jono...
It's a vibe that people get.
Like, Jono got an increase in his vote. He took a fifth of Labor's mayoral vote away and brought it into.
We're not talking about. Can I say we're not talking about Jono? I only brought up Jono as a symptom, right? Like I'm not talking like we're not asking. Oh, does every voter in the country know what Jonathan Shree thinks? I'm not asking that. I'm saying that's an example of a very prominent Greens thinker. Like he's also a strategist for the Greens party. He's a Greens intellectual, right? And he's very prominent in thinking that Australia should not exist. And there's a lot of people in the Greens that are like that. I'm basically saying, like, is that something that's killing the Greens?
I mean, I don't know. I don't see inside people's heads. I can tell you it wasn't something I was getting at the doors. I mean, the reasons why people didn't want to vote Greens were like, why didn't people want to vote Greens? CFMEU, although I didn't get that one much, to be honest. I think some people thought Labor was just doing a good job. Or people that had just voted Liberal forever. I think I got that a lot. And I think basically those were the only people that voted Liberal in Ryan where I was knocking, because they got like a pretty hefty swing against them. I've knocked on, I've had hundreds of conversations over this election. I've probably had like well over 1,000, maybe a couple. No, not a couple, but like over the last year, probably almost 1,000 when I ran for Currumbin as well. And I didn't get this sort of Australia, like you're not patriotic enough. Maybe I got it sometimes, but like I didn't have the impression that those people were going to vote Green anyway. I think they were I don't even think they were Labor voters. They seemed like dyed in the wool LNP or One Nation that was coming at me with that sort of thing. And I really didn't get it that often at all. I mean, I can only speak from my personal experience, and I didn't get those sort of objections much at all. It was more, are your policies realistic? Are your you're a minor party, can you form government? Oh, you support the tram, and I don't like the tram. Or, I got these objections far more than I got anything about, nationalism, patriotism.
Okay, well, this is the interesting thing, right? Because you're saying it's not a problem with the Greens' policies. It's not a problem with the fact that the Greens went too far left. It's not a problem with the Greens' overall strategy. So, like, what actually then explains the loss? Do you really think that you go to the 2028 election and you take in a platform that's even more left-wing to the Australian people? Do you really think that actually does well?
Well, I mean, I don't. As I said, I don't think that I mean, it could have been because of our policies, but I don't think the response is to change the policies. I think the response is to try and convince people of our policy platform. Like me getting objections like the Greens can't form government or are your policies realistic? Those aren't hard objections to the policies. Those are things that people can be convinced out of. Immigration. Oh, I got immigration all the time. Actually, I don't know how.
Okay, let's talk immigration. That's a very important one. Let's talk about immigration.
Mr. Infinity Migration over here.
Okay, let me just quickly lay out my position.
Mm-hmm.
There is such a thing called supply and demand. It applies when it comes to housing. You can't just say supply and demand does not exist when it comes to the housing market. Mm-hmm. Alan Kohler, who's a progressive economist, like more Labor aligned, he literally said in January he said on the ABC recently that in January demand doubled supply. When it came to the housing market, the rental vacancy rate in Brisbane is 0.7%. If you look at Max Chandler-Mather's policies in the past, he's opposed new developments. So is this just like the most cynical thing ever, where you're opposing new developments on NIMBY grounds, but at the same time you're increasing supply through supporting higher immigration? Is that not just a cynical policy where you're basically saying, let's just make the housing crisis worse because it helps us get more votes?
When I said when I put in Twitter, Drew, debate me, coward, I didn't know I'd be invited on tonight. I actually probably was going to say, let's just talk about housing because it's the one that
let's talk about housing and immigration.
Yeah. The thing is that, okay, so what did you say? The NIMBY grounds. Okay, let's address the immigrate. Actually, the NIMBY grounds issue is easier.
There's two parts. Right? Let me say, right, there's two parts of it. I'm not just somebody who's saying it's only immigration. I'm saying it's a combination of lack of supply, which comes from NIMBYism, but it's also massive demand, which comes from high immigration. So it's both sides of the issue. Yeah.
Okay. So the NIMBY thing, I mean, you look at the Greens controlled councils have some of the highest approvals, like highest speed, highest amount of approvals for new housing in the country, Greens controlled councils. You look at Max, to my knowledge, didn't oppose anything on NIMBY grounds. Developments that he
I used to look
opposed,
around the corner from that.
The developments
that was like 1,000 apartments.
were on floodplains. He opposed developments on floodplains, and not only did he oppose developments on floodplains, it wasn't just something searching for an excuse to be a NIMBY, because he actively proposed sites in his electorate, and Jono did the same thing. When Jono was running for mayor, he would give press conferences outside of sites that he thought would be suitable for new medium or high density housing. That was part of the Greens push. You know, you look at Max. Max went down to Tweed, which is in Mandy Nolan's like target electorate. A Greens
went to New South Wales.
And actively stood outside of a empty site and said, if you elect us, we will push for this site to be developed into medium density housing. We will do this all over the country. That we ran what.
It's quite interesting that he went all the way to New South Wales to do that, not really right down the street in Balimba, where you've got these rich families that don't want to have more development.
I mean, he actively also proposed sites in his electorate. I was just bringing up one
in
that was a target seat for the Greens, one that could be threatened by NIMBYs going away from them. We went and we actively said we want new housing here.
Hey guys, I'm pretty tired. I got something at 9 tomorrow, so I enjoyed coming on, Drew. I'm happy to go on again, but I'll probably
CJ,
tap out.
I feel like you haven't talked in a while. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I feel bad because we didn't have CJ talking much. CJ, I'll have you on again this week.
All right. Yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay. Good talk. We'll continue, Braden. Okay, so yeah, sorry, keep going.
So I think that the NIMBY accusation just simply, isn't true. I mean, and the thing is, you look at these, you can pull up an article, and the thing is, I know all the articles, and they're all kind of, snaky and not really representative. Like, for example, there's this awful article about Amy McMahon opposing development, and the article fails to mention that if you go onto any of Amy McMahon's actual communication about the development, the main reason she's opposing it is because it's privatization of public land. She was in support.
There's always a cope. There's always a cope. There's always a convenient excuse to say, in this area where we've got a lot of wealthy people, we don't want to have new development. We'll push it out onto the fringe.
And the thing is, we weren't even opposed to development on that site. Public land, and this was the same thing in Victoria, where there was public land that they were going to privatize and build more housing on. We were saying, no, it's fine if you want to build more housing there. That's fine. That's good. But you can't do it privately because it is public land. It is a privatization of public land if you do it that way. Because they say, oh, you're blocking new housing, when in fact it's opposing just wholesale, like basically giving away public assets to be profiteered off by the private sector. I don't think, and then they get.
Can I say one thing? It's pretty interesting though that it doesn't seem like you guys are really keen on, addressing the issue, building supply, unless it's completely on your terms, like no floodplains, it's not privatized, like it has to meet all this checklist conditions for the Greens to to accept new development.
That's two. That's two checklists.
No, but those are just two of them. But it's a common theme when it comes to Greens. There's always a new reason why this site's not right. This site's not right. We've got to find a new place. We do support it in theory, but just not in this concrete circumstance. There's a lot of cases like that.
I think because the Greens push for development to be quality in areas. There's this anecdote and I think it perfectly demonstrates it debunks kind of the YIMBY approach, and it debunks the NIMBY approach. It's this anecdote that is used a lot, where this was in America. This socialist councillor, I believe, city councillor, said that she wanted something like 40%. A private development was proposed with like 20% affordable housing, and she said, no, I'm going to stand in its way. I want it to be like 40%. And then the developer was like, okay, fine, we'll make it 40%. And then she was like, oh, actually, I want it to be 100%, and I'm going to oppose it anyway. I think though that anecdote is used a lot by Yimbys to be like how dumb are NIMBYs, but I think it also proves that just signing blank checks to develop, because in that anecdote she literally secured, if she had taken the offer, would have secured more housing. But
we're getting sidetracked because I don't really
finish my point.
Bring up the American issue.
This was all to make a point that I believe what happens is Greens reps push to make developments in their area better and good, and then they will try and move ahead. And you can see that in Greens councils where they improve massive amounts of development.
Okay, that's your contention. That's the supply side of the issue. Let's talk about the demand side of the issue. What do you think is the ideal number of migrants to Australia every year in light of the existing strains on housing and infrastructure?
I don't know the exact number that's going to be most economically beneficial, but I can tell you that this current rate is not particularly harmful.
Okay, so
I can't say like a specific number.
We've got a 0.8%
the current rate.
So we've got a 0.8% rental vacancy rate in Brisbane. How can you then say this current rate of migration, which is obviously putting pressure on that vacancy rate, how can you say that that's a good thing, that's working well?
Because you've got to look at you've got to break down why these people are coming in. I mean, you look at the visas.
I'm just asking you straight supply and demand, right? You've got an X amount of dwellings. Right now, we're at historically low rental vacancy rates. It's really hard to find a new rental. I went through that process earlier in the year. It was like I literally had to apply for 70 different rentals before I got a place. Okay, it's a fucking disaster out there. Now, how can you say, really, given how much pressure there is on the rental market right now and on the housing market right now, how can you say of the current numbers of migration are not contributing whatsoever? Because it clearly is. It clearly is, because we have had historic levels of migration. Like, for example, the last year was the highest rate of migration in the entire 60,000 years of habitation of the entire of the continent of Australia. If you look at human habitation of the continent of Australia going back 60,000 years, more people arrived last year in 1 year than any time over the past 60,000 years.
That for sure isn't true, because the year directly after COVID, the year after we opened our borders was like significantly more than any recent years. It's declined. I don't have the stats.
My overall point. Look, my overall point, right? Like the past 2 years, basically since COVID, we have had overall like the largest migration surge in the history of the entire continent of Australia. If you go back 60,000 years. So how can you then say 0.8% rental vacancy rates in Brisbane, that's okay, continue the really high rates of current migration?
Okay, well, I think that a large chunk of the immigration isn't necessarily contributing much to the housing crisis, because the biggest chunk of immigrants is made up of foreign students who aren't.
But they need a place to live as well. They need a place to live as well.
Overwhelmingly, foreign students live either in, share houses that aren't going to be, but that not even that really. I mean,
most of them accommodation, but there's not enough
in student accommodation in places because they get funneled into those places as a foreign student.
The problem is we've run out of student accommodation in Australia. Like there currently is not enough student accommodation. So there's a spillover into the wider general rental market as well.
Yeah, there is a spillover, but I will say the overwhelming majority of them are housed in student accommodation. I know people who live in student accommodation, and I don't know if that's like really the ideal, like, oh, don't worry, first home buyer, where we freed up the supply by limiting foreign students. Now you get to live in the uni lodge box. Like, I don't think that's necessarily.
But dude, but we both know it's a straw man to say that all these international students are just living in uni lodges, because we both know that's a straw man. Like there is a big wider spillover
in student accommodation.
Dude, it's at the point where I think the current estimates are about, if there was a lowering of the international student. I think the current estimate basically is that international students represent about 4 to 5% of the rental market in Australia. 4 to 5%. I will try to get the current stats.
Yeah, but that would be including student accommodation. because that is a rental market. You're renting a room in a student accommodation, so that's also accounted for in that.
Hang on, we're trying to. If anybody in the chat can point us to the exact stats at the moment.
And I will also say that, you know, you're citing these vacancy rates. The fact is that there are, and you know, when you debate Adu has the proper stats on this. The land banking, like basically corporations that hold tens of thousands of houses vacant. I mean, you look at, I can pull up a quote from the Meriton guy, the founder or the owner of Meriton, yeah, who literally said that he is purposefully holding housing.
Well, yeah, he's bad. Of course, he's bad.
Withholding housing, but to increase.
Can I ask you this, right? Let's ask this. Here's a good question, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you say that international students are not behind this surge, right? Okay, mm-hmm. let's take that for granted. Mm-hmm. Now, why is it the case that during COVID, when we had way less international students and we had way less people entering the country, mm-hmm. we had rental vacancy rates going up to like 5% in Melbourne, and coincidentally, the rental prices in all these cities across Australia were falling or staying stagnant.
Do you remember the rental moratorium at the time in 2020? Probably because of that. And if you look at 2021, when that was lifted, that was when the surge started. That was when the increase started. 2021, despite there's still, you brought up this example when that isn't really true at all. If you look at 2021, this is the key year that proves this entire worldview wrong, because we didn't have, I believe 2021 even had net negative migration, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, but at the very least, very little migration. That still saw. I
found the stat. I found the stat. International students utilize 7% of Australia's private rental accommodation, 1 in every 14 rental homes. That's going beyond the student accommodation. That's actually just rental homes.
Are you sure that's going beyond the student accommodation? Because that doesn't sound like it does.
That's private rental accommodation.
A student accommodation is a private rental. It's a private business renting out to you. That would be included in that, unless there's a caveat that you're not reading out.
I'm gonna get this fact sheet up.
We're literally both like trying to find. The Meriden guy. I'm holding a lot more than I am selling at the moment, and as the value of my value of property goes up, the value of what I have kept rises. The thing is, even if you created all this supply by limiting migration, obviously I don't think you're proposing to deport anyone, so you're not probably going to free up much housing. How is this?
Well, I think we've got to lower student numbers in this country. We can't have we can't have 1 million in a country of 26 million, 27 million.
How? Okay, so we can live in the thing is, even if they're using homes in the private market, this isn't benefiting. This would primarily, even if we take your word for it, would be primarily benefiting people that are seeking like temporary or like very young people, uni students that are seeking these kind of accommodation, which I agree is important, but it isn't tackling the first home buyers that are looking to get into the market, or the first time, like people that actually want to rent proper houses, not student boxes or like share houses with 15 people in it. That still isn't addressed by cutting student numbers. And you haven't demonstrated, here's the thing, you haven't demonstrated why the private market, why people like the Meriton guy and all of the land banking corporations that hold tens of thousands of houses.
Yeah, we should penalize that behavior. I actually think we should tax, people explicitly engaging in land banking. I'm not going to fucking defend the practice of land banking, but I just don't think, I think that's a cope to just I think that's a cope when you're just looking at land banking and you're trying to say, oh, well, if you have a surge of like 1 million people coming into the country over 2 years, that's not going to have any impact on the rental market whatsoever. Because the fact is, we don't have enough. It spills over. It spills over well beyond just student accommodation. And there's a perfect track. This is the interesting thing. There's a perfect track in rental prices going up across all the major cities in Australia and the massive surge in migration that we've seen since 2022. It perfectly tracks. So why is that?
Since 2021. We saw a surge
yes,
in rental prices before the immigration started spiking.
It surges beyond that, right? So once the borders reopen, the rental prices go up massively, and house prices also go up massively. Why is that?
The house prices.
These numbers actually track perfectly, basically.
The thing is, they started before the other thing is,
I'm looking at it now. So in 2021, the average. Okay, let me pull it up. Hang on. So annual rental growth, 2021, 1%. Then it's literally tracking. These are tracking.
Which one's which? Which is the blue? Which is the red?
Rental blue is rents, and then red is net overseas migration.
You don't see net. There's an increase while in net negative migration.
Look at 2022. So in 2022, the annual rental growth increase is about 2 to 3%, right? Then when the net overseas migration rate goes up to like 7%, then at the same time, the annual rental growth is going up to 7-8%. So why are these numbers tracked so closely? When we start taking about 600,000 a year,
they mirror each other because of COVID. Because COVID depressed both.
Barely.
And then
not really.
I mean, look at it. It depresses both around.
So we closed borders in 2019. Rental growth goes backwards. That's the price of the that's rental price growth actually goes backwards. That's when the borders are closed. Then when we reopen the borders, then that's when.
One thing I will note as well is that while this is, they look like they're tracking, this is more people coming into this is people coming into the country. So it isn't like the amount of people.
That's what migration is.
Migration. Let me just finish my point. So you look at the peak of the migration line there. Sure, it looks like it tracks because the housing prices start going down just as the immigration starts going down. But the immigration isn't really going down, is it? It's the amount is going down.
This chart's about a year old. It's probably
more and more people coming into the country. And the thing
and the rents are going up again. This chart's like a year old.
And the other thing I will say is that it works on the other way too, because you're seeing the rent start to go back up even as more people are leaving the country. Net negative migration means that more people are leaving the country and rents were still going up.
This famous study that everybody loves
showed that as people were leaving the country, rent started to go up.
We've got, like, everyone loves to quote this study where it's like international students not to blame for rising rents, but it's like literally endorsed by the Property Council of Australia. Like, and I can't take it that you're a big fan of the Property Council of Australia.
I'm not, no. But I think your graph is interesting.
Can I ask you this, right?
It showed that housing prices were going up while people are leaving.
Can I ask you this, right? We both don't like the Property Council of Australia. So why is it that we don't. So why is it that your stance when it comes to migration is almost perfectly aligned with the Property Council of Australia's stance? I mean, as a socialist, why is that? It's weird. Why is that?
I mean, well, the entire like student accommodation industry is like extremely exploitative of international students.
Of course, and it's mean to them as well.
It doesn't mean kick them out of the country. It
I'm
means
not saying
make
kick them out of the
the
country. I'm saying we
accommodation.
can't have the I'm not saying kick them out of the country. I'm saying we're accepting too many people beyond what we can actually accept, what we can actually
I'm just
take.
explaining why the property council is probably, still in support of this kind of thing, so they can maintain this exploitative industry.
Because they're the ones. This is a strange thing, and I want you to reflect on this, right, Braden?
Mhm.
Why is it the fact that you're Greens, you're a socialist, you're anti-capitalist? Why is it that your stance on migration perfectly aligns with the interests of the Business Council of Australia and the Property Council of Australia? Because they want to have more migration. They want to have more migration because it tracks with higher property prices.
They want more people in their exploitative industry so that they can exploit them within the student accommodation sphere. I don't think the international students get scammed all the time. I thought, because of their unfamiliarity with the systems that the systems that go on in a brand new country. I would be the same thing if I was an international student somewhere else. So I don't think it's necessarily contradictory when you're saying why am I as a socialist aligning with these capitalist institutions? All over the world, all throughout history, the vast majority of at least principled socialist leftists have been pro-immigration, have been, I'm not necessarily in support of it, but pro-open borders, and that sort of.
What? Really? Is that true? Is it really true that socialists throughout all history have been pro-open borders?
I mean, it depends on what you define as a socialist. Like Marx, like the principled socialists, have been, yes.
So could you make the case for us? Can you make the case for us, like the argument behind that?
No, no, because I'm not necessarily in support of it myself, but I'm saying that it's a storied history of socialists being pro-immigration.
But and look, I still think there's a role for migration. I'm not anti-migration per se.
Get Jordan Van den Lam on. He'll explain open borders.
I've literally tried to have him on and he refuses, right? But like you've got the quote, right, where Bernie Sanders. What do you say?
I said he's got better judgment than me.
Oh, here. But in 2016 or 2017, Bernie Sanders said, he was asked by Ezra Klein, "Do you support open borders?" And Bernie Sanders said,
he said it's a Koch brothers proposal.
Yeah. And I think he was actually right there. It is a Koch brothers proposal because, isn't it basically designed to lower the wages of domestic workers at the expense of people who are coming from really poor countries, and they will accept lower wages?
I mean, it's whether you do it in a way that's exploitative or do it in a way that respects the rights of the people that immigrate. The people, the reason why business owners in a lot of cases want to bring in migrants is because they want a class of people that they can continue to exploit.
I agree with you. I do agree with you there. But I actually agree with you.
There's a different. It's like
so you're
a difference in approach if a socialist was doing.
So what's your approach as a socialist? What makes you want to bring in more people then? If you have a big distinction between so the big business want more people, but they want them to exploit them. You don't want to exploit them. What's behind the idea of having more people?
I mean, I think we're a very lucky. We're very lucky in this country to have various privileges, various rights. I think a lot of more people could do with those kinds of things, and I think if they want to come here, they should be allowed to. But
shouldn't the outlook of the government be mostly focused on the welfare of the original citizens of the country? It seems like you're saying that we should value the interests of people overseas who might want to come over the interests of people already in the country. Why is that? Who do you think the Australian government?
I'm not a national. I don't
this
view
is more of a
Australian
philosophical
citizens as more. I don't view Australian citizens as more deserving of rights than any other person in the world.
Okay, so you're an Australian Greens. You want to have an Australian Greens government, but you think that an Australian Greens government shouldn't place the welfare of Australian citizens above the welfare of anybody else in the world.
No, I think that's correct because
why? But isn't the job of the government to manage, to look out for the welfare of the citizens of that country in the first place, right?
I think we should also be looking at, and I think there's a lot of ways we could I think that the interests of Australians and the interests of people in other countries, I don't think they're incompatible. I don't think they need to be pitched against one another. And I think that them being pitched against one another.
But sometimes they are though. Like for example, right now, when we've got a massive housing crisis right now, like the interest of, even the interest of a migrant who arrived 5 years ago, their interest is not to have massive infinity migration because they can't get housing right now.
I think that there's things we can do about the housing crisis that don't involve. I don't think, I mean, maybe if immigration was like at a genuinely insane number, maybe, but I don't think it is at the moment when the pre-COVID projected population for 2025 is lower than our current population is now.
So you actually think migration's not high enough?
I didn't say that necessarily. I think at the very least, though, I will say I think we need to be accepting a hell of a lot more refugees.
What's the ideal number for you?
Through our asylum seeker process by a lot.
Okay, what's the ideal number of refugees do you think that Australia should take in?
Well, basically, I mean, a hell of a lot more than we've got now. I mean, it's like something like
we've already got like as we've got a comment right here. We literally per capita we basically have the highest migration rate in the world, and you're saying
that's true. That's true. But we also have so much room.
Okay. So you think doubling? Do you think double? What do you think would you support doubling the current migration rate?
Depends who's coming, and no, I don't think so. I don't think that doubling would get more, but I don't think,
When you say it depends who's coming, what does that mean? Like,
I think refugees ultimately have more of a. At least my personal opinion is I think refugees should be prioritized in people
over economic migrants.
Yeah. Ultimately, I don't think that there would be that many more. I don't know if there would be enough people who necessarily want to come to Australia, at least of economic migrants who are just like going to move from like another stable country and create their life here.
I have a proposal for you.
I don't know. As I said, I can't name you like a number. Okay. I can defend the current rate.
Okay, I've got a proposal for you, right? I think, what's the current refugee rate in Australia?
13,000. This is our current refugee intake. It's 13,000 a year, and I think that is pathetic.
Okay, so the current refugee migrant intake is 13,000 a year, and I believe our current economic migrant intake is about 500,000 a year. Would you support taking? How about you double refugee migrant intake from 13,000 to 26,000, and then we take economic migration back from 500,000 to 150,000. Would you accept that compromise?
Well, that's the thing, is that I don't think that our country could cope with that, because if you look at the second, we were talking about student numbers earlier. You look at the second highest visa category. It's people that we're taking in because we specifically want to bolster employment in certain areas like construction or healthcare. And I think if you're dialing back economic migration,
I want to point out, you say that you support the CFMEU. The CFMEU very explicitly made a carve out when it came to migration. They blocked construction workers coming to Australia. Do you support that?
No.
Why?
I haven't heard about that.
Their interest as a union.
And I don't agree with everything that the CFMEU does. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of the forestry division.
They did that though. They did that because that was their idea of what the union membership needed, because they didn't want to see their own labor undercut by foreign labor. So
there is a nationalist tendency in the labor movement for sure. I mean, you look at all the way back, with the Labor Party introducing the White Australia policy, like this has been a tendency. Just because I support like most of the advocacy that the CFMEU does in terms of wanting to, encourage the government to take a more active role in building housing and advocating for better pay and conditions for their workers, doesn't mean I agree with every political position they take on immigration.
However, it's not just a political position that they're taking just to be racist or whatever. They're doing it because it's explicitly in their economic interest. It's explicitly in their economic interest because they don't want to have They don't want to have their own wages undercut by, foreign construction workers. So how can you be like a good unionist and oppose them on that core issue? Like that's a core plank of their platform, right?
Because I'm not a national. I don't value uniquely. I mean, if in government it is different. To be fair, you have you have jurisdiction over Australian citizens. You have more power to better their lives than you do people in other countries. But myself, as a private citizen now, and a private, I guess I do activism a bit nowadays. Now that the election's over, I guess, with the homeless people around the Gold Coast. But as a private, citizen activist, whatever, I don't necessarily think that Australian workers are, uniquely more worthy than migrant workers, than people that live in other countries. I'm not a nationalist. I'm an internationalist. I'm not a
okay. Can I ask you? Can we focus on that question? Because before you said that when it comes to the outlook of the Australian government, it shouldn't place the welfare of Australian citizens above the welfare of anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So can I just ask that, right? Like that would seem extremely counterintuitive to most people, because like, what is the purpose of a government? The purpose of the government is to, look after its own citizens. So why is it that you actually would favor, like, why do you think that Australian citizens should not be looked after as a preference by the government?
Well, I think they should be looked after as a preference just because of utility, because the government can do more to affect the lives of Australian citizens than it can foreign citizens. However, I do think that view of the government as a tool to advocate for the interests of its own citizens above all others has created a lot of the imperialism, a lot of the extraction, a lot of the conditions in less powerful countries deteriorating massively in the name of advocating for the citizens of the country that the government is representing. And I think that is an incredibly pernicious thing. It's one of the greatest evils of our time. I would say is imperialism and is extraction from other countries that is done on the grounds of benefiting our domestic citizens or America's domestic citizens.
Do you want to take a 2-minute break, Brandon? Because I got to go to the bathroom. We can keep going, but maybe 2-minute break. Okay, all good. Okay, 1 second. You can keep chatting you can take a break too, or you can keep chatting to people. I'll just quickly 1 second.
Let's look at the chat. People put stuff in the chat if you want me to read it. I've been kind of glancing off to the side, but I haven't. Do socialists have jobs? I have 2. Ban the anti-Semitic guy. I wonder if he was actually anti-Semitic or just like anti-genocide. Thoughts on Rima Naji's view on private schooling and parent choice? I can't say I'm familiar. Socialists love Putin's imperialism. They only hate pro-liberal imperialism. I actually very much dislike Vladimir Putin. If you go onto my Twitter, one of the first flags in the bio is Ukraine. I've said before that we should increase our support to Ukraine, not decrease it in light of Trump doing that. So I think that your narrative kind of just falls apart when you talk to most socialists. Would the Greens be willing to support nuclear if it presented a feasible pathway to net zero? Probably not. I mean, I don't think it does. It's like, would you support, like, I don't know, Donald Trump if he was actually cool? And it's like, well, I mean, I guess it was actually cool, but he isn't, I don't think that is the case, that it provides a feasible pathway to net zero. It would be super long for it to... Sorry, I was just talking to people in your chat.
Yeah, no. By the way, I want to have... My friend Chris wants to join, and he's like a liberal. Would you be okay with having...
is that guy, the one that... What's
it's
his
not
handle? He's Chris...
No, he's not on Twitter. You wouldn't know him.
Right-wing stuff.
No, it's not. He's not on Twitter.
Oh, he isn't?
Chris, no, you
I
wouldn't
am,
know him.
in fact, not an x.com user. That's a bad site for bad people.
But he loves like
Okay,
nuclear
I
energy.
thought,
and
I
stuff
thought
like
it was what's Chris Discoveries or something?
No,
I thought
no,
it was
it's not
that.
Chris Discovery. It's
What?
not Chris Discovery. I wouldn't. No, it's not
Literally
Chris
who?
Discovery.
That's a literally who.
I
No,
I
it's not
see him in
Christopher.
your replies a bit, so I was just worried it was him, and I was like, I'm pretty sure
I see Chris De Bruno in the replies. I recoil.
Right-wing
Ugh.
stuff. So okay, that's fine, I guess.
Okay.
No, just to come back on
Should
the
we go
nuclear
nuclear
power
or
plant.
immigration?
Let's go nuclear first because the chat has just touched on nuclear.
They did, yeah.
What is your major opposition to nuclear on a net zero standpoint?
It'd take too long. We need to get to net zero way faster than nuclear would be able to get us to net zero, and also the it's super expensive, and that money can be better utilized building up renewable technology. I mean, I'm not an expert on nuclear, yeah, it's and I think that it's about as done a debate now as you can get in Australian politics. I think an article I saw that the Liberals are internally being like, we're going to scrap it. So I think that the debate has been won.
Look, the internal
one thing,
Liberal Party
Chris, one thing. I have to say, earlier in the chat, Braden said that you know, when it comes to electoralism, sometimes it's more important to stand on principle than voting. So, what do you think on that, Braden?
Yeah, look, I think that's
if
that was
on nuclear, then that's fine.
It was a very principled stand. I wish I'd devoted more time to actually, defending what I thought was probably one of the most principled viewpoints I've put forward in a while. Certainly for a state-owned nuclear power enterprise.
Yeah, very socialist.
Which it was. I thought it was incredible. I thought it was very red Tory actually, which provides lots of highly skilled, long-term jobs for for the working class in the regions. I thought that was a very red Tory point. I was very impressed with that. What I was less impressed about though, were the calculations that I know that you're referencing about the cost, which whether you take the semi-independent reports or those from AMO and the CSIRO, which really poorly account, I think, for the lifetime, for the discount rate of nuclear power plants, putting them out to 20 years. So yes, if you build a nuclear power plant and knock it down in 20 years, then obviously the costs are going to be incredible, right? Because
why would you do that?
These are not 20-year assets, right? Whereas you are having to put in new solar panels, new wind turbines on the order of, depending on how efficient, and even if you take perfect installation, on the order of every 7 to 10 years, the costs over a 60-year lifetime mount up. And now that is hard to account from a capital allocation perspective in a paper. And I understand the reasons that CSIRO have given for the economics that they've done. But in a long-term sense, they are the numbers are well off. As for a too late argument, I mean I don't buy that. That's basically just cope, right? I think that's cope from any either from you or Labor Party, or anybody who says it's too late to if it's an issue that's important. I think it's a piece of the energy mix that you have to look at, because the fundamental and underlying reality is, if you get intermittency in the system and the lights go off, it won't be a choice between nuclear and like renewables. It'll be the electorate saying, the power needs to come back on, and whatever we need to vote for to get that will be the solution. And it will be coal. It will be brown coal out of Loy Yang, black coal out of the Hunter Valley, because that is like that is the fundamental underpinning part of our economy and our society is consistent and reasonably cheap power. And and in a perfect world where renewables work perfectly, I think it's a game Australia could play. But you're in the Greens. Are you willing to leave that up to the chance of a Labor or a Liberal government to implement?
I mean,
Right, I
think
dumped a
you're-
lot on you there, so I'll let you process that for a sec. Drew,
Yeah.
you had something. I rudely talked over you.
No. I just was I was just bringing up the point that Braden made earlier about sometimes you have to take a stance that's politically unpopular on the sake of principle.
Yeah, look, and what Braden thinks about the screed I just laid out, and jump in any time and you want to stop me. I think it was a very principled stand for the Liberal Party, which a lot of the time has succumbed to like pure electoralism, and you saw that a lot during the last election of just copying, word for word, and maybe changing the funding distribution of a lot of policies. And I think that really hurt them. And the one that wasn't was poorly defended, which is very sad because I think it's a good option. It's a consistent, it's a consistent, clean option.
Would you remove the prohibition at least, Braden? Would you at least say that it shouldn't be illegal?
The thing is that I really don't see the need. I mean, there's a reason why the coalition has said that they want it to be like state owned, because the fact is that, the overwhelming majority of private nuclear projects or even government.
Suddenly you like the private market. Suddenly you like the private market. I'm a bit concerned. I'm a bit confused because you're a socialist, you're against the private market, but suddenly you're saying state-owned is bad. Let's look at what the private market thinks when it comes to nuclear. That's confusing me as a socialist.
Well, I'm saying that there's a reason why I am for publicly owned energy, but I'm saying that there's a reason.
I actually am too, believe it or not.
There's a reason why the free market liberals in the Liberal Party still didn't campaign on lifting the moratorium, and in fact campaigned on government ownership. Now, if they were campaigning on government ownership for the entire power sector, it'd be like, oh, okay, well then there's obviously something going on here. But they were specifically campaigning on it for nuclear. And I would think that was probably because the overwhelming majority of nuclear projects around the world in recent years have gone bust, have gone bankrupt, have failed to, have blown out, gone over budget.
That's just the inefficiency of capitalism, I would think, Braden.
Yeah, maybe actually, yeah. Maybe look, okay, we'll compromise. If Chris over here can endorse socialism and the abolition of private property, then I'll take nuclear.
Well, he's saying that it should be state-owned. Why is that not enough?
Pardon?
He's just saying that it should be state-owned, and I think it should be state-owned as well. Like, I actually think for some level of the energy, strategic infrastructure, it should be state-owned.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily against as a natural monopoly. I'm not I'm not going to say like socialism is good, but that as a natural monopoly, I do find it increasingly hard to. I don't think I've ever found it particularly a convincing argument for the privatization that was made wholesale of certain assets like water supplies and like the power system and perhaps telecommunications to an extent. There are situations where the free market doesn't provide an optimal solution, where you get mass duplication of services and goods. There are clear places where it doesn't work. That doesn't mean I think that you should go down the street and every coffee should be owned by state-owned coffee corp. And somebody in Canberra has decided that the beans and the grind time. But electricity is a commodity, and those kind of commodities don't work well when there's very little ability for a
because no one can just start up their own nuclear power plant. Like you can't just if there's a natural nuclear...
you can't really start up your own gas-fired peaking plant or a solar energy. You can give it a go with a solar power plant, but again, like you're still hooking into an interconnected system which is managed by AEMO.
Here's the thing, and I think this is the thing about nuclear that is beyond the cost, because I mean, I hear conflicting things about the cost. A lot of experts will say how expensive it is. Chris will come on and say that, obviously that it has longer lifetime. But the thing is, with the longer lifetime stuff, that isn't necessarily going to help us much with net zero if we're looking at we need to get to net zero as soon as possible. And this is, establishing an entire new section of the power
Are you aware, Braden, that the only developed economy in the world that has decarbonized its grid is France, and they did it through nuclear?
I mean, sure, but that was they had that's irrelevant to the point that I'm making.
It's
because
not,
France,
France
how long has
why
France
can't
had
we do
nuclear
it?
since like the 60s? When did France get nuclear?
Yeah, I mean they did it obviously decades ago. I wish we'd done it back then, but like,
And look,
does that
there
not
were
show you, like-
plans then, but again, they weren't followed through for various, at the time, quite political reasons, and
I
that
just
which coincide with the peaking of that sort of first environmentalist movement. And I will point out that a lot of the early anti-nuclear movements were funded by the USSR.
Can I say, I think the problem behind why so many Greens don't accept nuclear energy is because they know that nuclear energy can basically decouple emissions from economic growth. So it just basically kills the whole degrowth movement, right? Because you can actually have economic growth without massive increases in emissions. And that's France proved it, right? And I think that's literally why, because there are a lot of degrowth. I know Jono Shree, for example, and again, I don't hate Jono. Like, I used to be friends with him and everything. Jono himself says he's a degrowther. And there are a lot of Greens people who are degrowthers. They don't like the idea of economic growth. And I think that's why ultimately, because otherwise, if you were someone who wanted economic growth, but you just wanted to have no emissions, you would look at nuclear, because France did it. France has had massive amounts of economic growth since the 60s, and they've done it without increasing their emissions.
I think the point of it is, though, that at this point we can't, though. Like, you look, France has had, I looked it up. Okay, so the first nuclear site in France opened in 1956. They have had decades upon decades, half a century to build up nuclear in that country. We do not have that time. We need net zero sooner than 2050 if we're going to meet climate.
It was by the 80s. They did it by the 80s. By the 80s, they had basically, it was in response to the Arab Gulf oil shock. They basically were able to completely decarbonize their energy grid. It didn't take them 70 years.
I mean, the coalitions. The thing is, you say this is, okay, theoretically you could, speed run nuclear. The thing is, the platform that was being said by the pro-nuclear party, the coalition, we got to like 10% of the grid by 10% of power by decades and decades from now. Like, it wasn't like it was gonna fully decarbonize us. In fact, it was a gas plan. It was a plan to extend gas well past 2050.
Okay, can we clarify?
I don't want to be blunt. No, I don't want to be blunt, but gas will be in whatever system, in whoever's plan, unless you wish to have the lights off, gas like coal or gas will be extended. I don't want to alarm you, but
we've got 25 years.
The lights going off for a country, for several states or a country, is that's game over for a government. You don't come back from that.
Again.
And that's what happened in Germany, right? This is the second Germany had proper energy insecurity because of their reliance on Russian gas. They reopened fucking coal mines rather than restarting their nuclear power reactors.
That was stupid. Yeah. Yeah,
but that was done by a green. That was done in conjunction with a Greenland's government.
Yeah.
Right.
German Greens.
It is beyond ideological. That is. I'm not even going to try and steal that.
Yeah, you're not going to find any disagreement.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I can take an argument seriously about, and there are other questions about the entire project of trying to go net zero when China and India and the United States are not on board. But if you're seriously going to do that undertaking, your options are to dig up large parts of the Murray River region and Western Australia to build solar panels, which is a decision that you can make, and you can subsidize that. Or you can dig up a lot less of, or leach out a much smaller part of South Australia and have energy enough for 10,000 years in terms of the fuel requirement. There are some CO2 emissions that go on with pouring that much concrete, but in terms of a lifetime emission standard, in terms of a green power generation system, the embodied emissions in wind turbines and solar is actually quite immense. right? And they take a couple of years to pay off their own emission standard, and because you have to replace them, and the technology evolves, and in the way it evolves, like you're spending a lot of you're just recouping the initial costs on a lot of carbon emissions.
Good night, Delbs. Thanks for joining. So Brandon,
anyway,
Brandon, can I clarify? Are you a degrowther, or do you do want economic growth, but you just want it decarbonized?
Honestly, it's something where I see compelling arguments from the degrowth side. I think that I am in support of whatever is going to increase people's quality of life. If that is economic growth, if that is borne out to be, I know that we definitely do need to decarbonize. I think ultimately, with a lot of the more long-term questions, questions of the state, of currency, of degrowth, of our relationship to ecology, or questions of deep ecology and stuff like that. Ultimately, I think I'm a bit agnostic on it all. I think that there needs to be there are much more pressing issues of kind of of capitalism and of imperialism that kind of come before any of these questions around degrowth and particular. I see compelling arguments, but I'm kind of agnostic. I think there are much more pressing things that need to be done.
We've got a question here. What do you actually see to be the good argument behind degrowth?
Well, there's the essential argument, right, in that, the book, I don't know if you would necessarily call it degrowth. I think they don't use the term degrowth in it. I think they reject that label, but that Prosperity Without Growth, that book, that essentially makes the very simple argument that Earth's resources are finite and you can't grow forever. It physically
you can with nuclear energy. The beautiful thing is you literally can do that with nuclear energy. We've got enough nuclear fuel to just power life.
Degrowth is a bit bigger than nuclear, though. Degrowth our resource consumption is bigger than just our energy consumption.
Energy is the core component here. Energy is like the prime building block of all economic activity.
And also the same thing with renewables is that is also, the whole aim of the game with renewable energy is that you're drawing it from infinite resources like wind, the sun, and water. I mean, those aren't hopefully going to go away. So we should be fine with that as well. I think that I think that also there is a certain argument that, I don't know. Again, I'm kind of agnostic on it with the he wants to degrow the economy. Sorry, I just glanced at the chat again.
Oh, hang on. What's the chat?
Yeah, the degrowth the economy while increasing population.
Pretty good question.
I want to degrade the economy. I'm saying that I've seen good. There are deep ecologist arguments and stuff like that about
Linklater has some great arguments
that come from infinite growth. I think that they are somewhat compelling to read. I don't know if they are necessarily true, but I think that if you read Bookchin or whatever, I think they're not entirely can be chucked in the garbage, but I don't know if I believe them myself. So that's why I say I'm kind of agnostic on it.
Can we? Should we? I don't know. Chris, do you have anything further added on nuclear? Because maybe we could just go back to that central question where we're debating before, where Braden was basically saying that the value of an Australian citizen should not be higher than the value of a person like overseas.
Look, I'm happy to jump back. Look, I have no look. If your opposition to nuclear is like effectively ideological, like I can't hope to change that. That's I've accepted that's baked in a lot of basically boomers who were alive during effectively the 60s and the 70s. Like there's not much like that's the ideological precedence of the movement. I'm not here to like there's with the best will in the world, like I can I'm not here to argue with the zealous. It's genuinely like trying to argue with a tradcath, right? Good luck.
Yeah, arguing with like a religious. Yeah, Braden,
Yeah.
do you have anything to add on nuclear, or should we go back to like the question more of like
I don't think I have anything to add on nuclear. I don't think I'm not an expert on energy on specifically like nuclear and renewables. It isn't the primary reason why I get involved in politics, but
that's a central. I mean, the only thing I would actually have to ask on this is what is your just guttural response to the fact that we make up a vanishingly small amount of emissions, and there are some there are clearly emissions that we and this would be called the drug dealers' defense, but if we stop tomorrow and we even stopped exporting coal and gas, the world's major emitters are not signed up to any kind of targets, and that we will degrow ourselves at the expense of the problem will not get solved, and we can beat our fists about it, but people, other countries will make rational decisions, and if that rational decision leads them to burning coal, like we will be burning in I don't want to say mud huts, but we'll be burning in commie block tenements rather than a slightly nicer castle.
Actually weren't that bad. There's actually a good article about that. But anyway,
like, hang on, you were talking about commie block.
It's an aside. You can.
It's an aside, Drew. Not even I didn't even click on it. I have.
We'll keep going. Let's go to the next one.
But yeah, what was your point? Yeah, so I think on that, I have had this argument before, so I'm more prepared for this one. The thing is that I totally agree that we don't make up that much of the world's emissions, and I think it's also why I always scoff at Labour saying that they're because Labour makes genuine strides to like get to lessen Australia's domestic emissions, but the fact is that our contribution to emissions isn't really in our domestic emissions. It's in what we export. And so on that point, I think that we're in kind of a global prisoner's dilemma at the moment, where this is I can't for the life of me I can't find it, but maybe if I looked really hard I could. But I did see. My grandfather would make this argument to me all the time, actually, about, well, if we stop digging up coal, then South Africa is just going to start digging up and shipping up more and more coal. I saw, I can't remember for the life of me who it was, but I saw a South African politician actually make, well, I don't know if it was a politician or it was an activist, made the same argument for Australia as a reason why South Africa can't decarbonize or can't stop digging up coal or exporting resources, fossil fuel resources. So we're in this situation where we have to decarbonize as quickly as possible because we are, on the brink of a climate crisis. I mean, we are in a climate crisis, and it's only going to get worse. And ultimately, we have to make this decision. Otherwise, it's going to be a collective action failure, and we're all screwed. We have to make the good decision in the prisoner's dilemma, and then hope and put pressure on other countries to do the same. Because if we don't, then if we don't, then nobody else will. And we are one of the biggest players in this. We are one of the biggest exporters. And so saying, for example, obviously the Greens don't want to stop all coal exports tomorrow. We want to stop new projects, but the lifetime of a lot of the current ones we want to see out. So just to finish the point, it isn't like we'd be telling all these countries we're going to stop tomorrow. It would be saying we are going to phase out these exports, figure out what you're going to do about it, which sure, if they could just go off and do coal, but it also could spur into action the transition that is already having other pressure points pushing on these countries to transition.
Can I ask you, Brent, if you believe it is a global climate crisis and we're in a really, really bad state, why would you why would you still say, okay, we'll still export some coal overseas?
Because it's unrealistic to shut it down tomorrow, right?
But my question is, right, like, if given your worldview is that we're in a fundamental crisis. We're in a fundamental crisis. We're right on the brink.
Millenarian apocalyptic, yeah.
Like if we're facing the total breakdown of human civilization, why wouldn't we stop coal exports tomorrow?
Well, we need to stop them as soon as possible, but tomorrow isn't possible. It would the other country if we stopped all coal exports tomorrow, it wouldn't facilitate transition to renewable energy. It would it would have throw out the power grids of like a bunch of other countries.
So we're agreeing then that
you can't stop it tomorrow. You need to have a reasonable phase out, but that phase out needs to be as quick as possible. Tomorrow is not possible. The next day is not possible, but as soon as possible, they need to be phased out.
Okay, fair enough.
The quickest, I'll put it this way: the quickest that we can, while it still facilitates a transition and doesn't just have rolling blackouts over wherever we previously.
So we do agree that rolling blackouts are bad.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're on some common ground. Okay, Chris, what do you?
It would degrow other people's economies. It would, rolling blackout. And I think that's actually the only other question on this topic that I wanted to pursue is, taking what you've said is true. That this is a sort of horrible precondition, and I will say it before I begin on the rest part of this. But if you have that climate crisis, it is essentially self-fixing, is it not? That will, if it will kill 2 or 3 billion people, that will essentially live out Linklater's deep ecology dream of basically fixing the problem of there are too many consumers on the planet. Like if you say that, like if you posit it as an apocalyptic crisis, it's 4 degrees, it's 5 degrees, it's however many, the concomitant changes as modeled would just simply kill off 4 or 5 billion people. It will, and 100 years later, it will, 100 or 200 years later, it will effectively have solved itself.
Well, to be fair, Chris, he doesn't want to see 5 billion people die.
Well, I'm just curious on the deep, on the logical pathway. I'm not actually.
On that one, I'm with Braden. I don't want to.
Yeah, I know. We've actually had this argument before, Drew.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. What do you say, Braden? I'm interested.
I don't want 4 or 5 million people to die. Maybe it is true that it would solve itself with the with a bunch of people dying, but I don't want 4 billion people to die. I think that would actually be pretty bad.
I do agree with Braden on that.
I'm glad.
Libtard.
Yeah, there's not much I agree with Drew on, but
damn, libtard.
We both don't want.
What, billions not literally dying? What the fuck?
We're not pressing the billions must die chud button, but yeah. Anyway, okay, let's go back to the question of migration and citizenship and things like that. Okay. So Braden, your central contention is that the government of Australia just should not be preferencing the kind of interests of Australian citizens over non-citizens. And I want to get to the morality behind that, because it would seem counterintuitive to a lot of people, and probably the vast majority of Australians.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I don't. The thing is that I don't see. I think that as people that are involved in politics, as political movements, they need to look at increasing the quality of life and the, I guess in a utilitarian sense, increasing the amount of good in the world. I don't think that I necessarily then would say that, we need to, we need to put the rest of the world down at the expense of Australia, which I get that isn't necessarily what you're saying, but I feel like that is the logical conclusion if you look at, exploitative resource extraction by imperial core countries, not just Western ones, but Russia, China, and then obviously America, Australia, the UK. These countries that are powerful exploiting and extracting at the expense of poor countries. And I do think that that is a result of that kind of almost nationalistic privilege of the people that live in that country. And I think
my
that has
problem is though, right?
unimaginable harm upon the world, and so we need to course correct.
My problem with this thinking though, right, is like every other group of people on the planet would have their government to look out for their interests. If our government isn't looking out for our interests, then don't we just get ganged up upon and smashed?
Well, it isn't that we necessarily don't look after our interest. It similarly follows that we don't want to put down Australians at the I'm not saying that we should I don't know. Well, actually, we probably should do a lot of reparations, but I'm not saying that we should
get into that. Can you
tell the NDIS to pay, I don't know, just random people overseas? I think
wouldn't that be the logical conclusion though to your arguments? Why support a much higher standard of living here in Australia when there are people doing much worse overseas?
I think that is a fair point to make. I just don't think there's a few reasons. I think in a democracy, you have to increase if you're doing this stuff. So this is my view. Ultimately, the people of the global South, oppressed nations generally, have they ultimately are front of mind for me and my political action. But ultimately, if you're the government of Australia, you're not going to get re-elected if you just funnel money there. So you also have to increase, if as you are supporting people around the world, you should be supporting workers around the world. But also, I think there is an element of leading by example. And I think there's by making your country uniquely, because you have control. As I said, you have control over your country more than any other country. So you are best positioned to benefit the lives of the people in your country. So I think there's that. And also you want to get re-elected. If you want to keep helping the workers around the world, the people in Australia will have to re-elect you. So I think there's
okay. Interesting. Interesting. So what do you think when it comes to, we're talking immigration. What do you think in terms of stuff like social cohesion? Should that be a goal that the government should pursue when we think about migration? Should we have a policy where we want migrants to assimilate? We want to try and make sure that new migrants are not, say, radical in their ideologies. They're not extremists. They don't want to, overthrow the existing state of things in Australia. Should there be a role for social cohesion in migration?
In a sense, but I do think, we haven't gotten onto this topic yet, and I didn't think you were going to, honestly, because
I did want to get there. We've just been talking about so much other stuff, but yeah.
Ultimately, I do think that in a vacuum, people getting on, communities getting on is a good thing, and I think you do see that in a lot of multicultural communities.
Do you think multiculturalism is
different people from a lot of different backgrounds? Pardon?
Do you think multiculturalism?
No. I just want to hammer home that point. Apart from somewhere like Singapore, which is economically very free, but on the whole not politically very free, where do you see that on a large scale?
I think there's communities all around Australia that do that. Obviously there is, social disruption, but I also think that, that parts of Melbourne, even parts of, to a lesser extent, Australia is broadly a very, very white country, but parts of Brisbane, around, some places in the Moreton electorate, other places around the country usually are surrounding the capital cities. I think that there is a certain people from all different backgrounds in one place, and I think it goes relatively fine. I think the second point that I was going to go into though is that while I do think it's good when people get along and people from different backgrounds come and and get along and all that. I do think when people like Drew use the phrase social cohesion, it's ultimately a dog whistle to say Muslims need to shut up and stop criticizing the government.
Oh my God. Explain that theory to me. Explain to me how wanting people to...
You think that your definition of social cohesion is people don't say the word Palestine.
No, it's not that. My definition of social cohesion is that we don't have Hamas rallies in the streets. And we don't, and for example, we don't have we don't have Sydney nurses. And here's a good one: we wouldn't have nurses in Sydney filming themselves saying, "Yeah, we're going to kill Jewish patients." I think that's a pretty good definition of social cohesion. Thoughts?
That is an instance of I guess racism that that there is.
Would you agree with me that when racism,
I can bring up like 10 Facebook video, I can bring up 10 billion videos of white Australians. I can bring up a video of Joel Davis, and then you're going to be like, "Can I deport Joel Davis?"
Is Joel Davis a nurse in a Sydney public hospital saying that he's going to kill black patients? I think Joel Davis is a sick guy, but he's not employed by the government as a fucking nurse.
The thing is, that's a good point, isn't it? Isolated cases. Look,
it's not an isolated case, though. It's such a disaster for the social fabric of the country if you're literally a nurse employed by the government in a public hospital and you're literally saying, "I will kill somebody based on their political views." Like, that's just fucking horrible, man.
I'm not going to defend it. I don't know what you're bringing up an isolate.
I just don't think
I saw. Okay, you know what I think is a threat to social cohesion? When I worked on the Voice referendum campaign, and I saw our Aboriginal volunteers get abused and harassed on the basis of their race. This is ever present in society, and you are nitpicking. You are not nitpicking, but you're highlighting a specific case because it furthers your political agenda, as opposed to the innumerable amount of disruptions to social cohesion that are caused by racists, anti-Aboriginal racists, anti-migrant racists.
Would you say that there's a racist problem within the Muslim Australian community towards Jews?
I mean, I think that.
Because there is racism, dude. Like, there's been firebombing attacks against.
I don't want to say yes to you because you interpret any kind of anti-Zionism as.
No, I'm not even, dude. Dude, can I just say,
you called them Hamas rallies. You called Palestine rallies Hamas rallies.
Dude, there have been Hamas flags at so many of these rallies, and there've been people holding up Nasrallah flags and Hezbollah flags. Do you think people should be allowed to go around with Hezbollah and Hamas flags in Australia?
I think it's a matter for the. I mean, I think there's free speech in this country. I don't know. There's specific things. I think it has.
Do you agree with people going?
I think that.
Good question. I've got a question here. Do you agree with the criminalization of the Nazi swastika in Australia?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Do you agree then as well with the criminalization of the display of Hamas and Hezbollah symbols in Australia?
I think that
why not straight away? Yes, like when it comes to the
Nazis. Not straight away? Yes, because there is
they're listed terrorist organizations.
Very much a difference.
How are they different? They are both organizations that, I mean, when it comes to Hamas and Hezbollah, they're organizations that are dedicated to killing Jews.
I don't think there's any context. Look, I'm not supportive of demonstrating these flags.
But do you think it should be criminalized like the Nazi swastika? Because you said very quickly that the Nazi swastika should be criminalized.
I think that there is certain. I think that. How do I phrase this? Look.
Okay, here's a good question. If somebody is here as a non-citizen and they're waving a Hezbollah flag, which is a listed terrorist organization, should they be deported?
I don't look.
Why not?
In favor of government supporting people for their political view. If you can find evidence that they are engaged in some sort of illegal activity,
okay. If
that's another story. If they've expressed,
if an American if an American neo-Nazi came to Australia and they were holding Nazi rallies, would you support deporting them?
Yeah, sure. Well,
okay, why would you not support a Lebanese neo-Nazi?
We did. Who was the other one? There was somebody's visa we declined.
I mean, Candace Owens had a
Tanzania,
visa. Candace Owens had a visa cancelled, right? So
Yeah,
it's like,
Candace Owens, yeah.
so why would you? Okay, we're both agreeing we don't want, say, like American neo-Nazi guys to come here and hold rallies. I agree with you, right? Why then would we say, okay, a Lebanese guy who's not a citizen here in Australia waving Hezbollah flag, he shouldn't be deported? Like, what? Why should they be allowed to be in the country and wave the flag of a foreign terrorist organization?
I think that, look, I would. Sorry, I just saw something in the chat. Look, I think we need to go back to your initial point with, because I think you are hyper focusing on these things.
I am giving
you made a sweeping generalization earlier where you called them Hamas rallies.
But there've been Hamas supporters at these rallies.
I attended regular Justice for Palestine protests in Brisbane, and I never saw a Hamas flag. I never saw a Hezbollah flag. I never saw any of these flags.
Well, they were all over Sydney and Melbourne rallies. They were all over Sydney and Melbourne rallies.
Saw, no, and you would call, but you would. Here's the thing, though. You would call whether a Palestine rally is full of Hamas flags or a Palestine rally a zero Hamas flags. You are still going to call it a Hamas rally.
No, I wouldn't. I'm talking about.
Would you
say
call
Hamas
the ones
rallies.
that were in Brisbane Hamas rallies?
I'm only talking about the ones that have extremist symbols and flags. So if there were no extremist symbols and flags at the Brisbane rallies, I wouldn't call them Hamas rallies. But they've been Hamas.
You would call them anti-Semitic, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily. I'm saying the ones that
No?
if there are slogans for the destruction of Israel, I would say it's anti-Semitic. What did you say?
Pardon? What did you say?
If there were slogans for the destruction of the state of Israel, I'd say that's anti-Semitic because that would involve the destruction of a country that has 7 million Jews.
So that's like from the river to the sea?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily say that. But when I'm talking about Hamas rallies, I'm talking about people explicitly with Hamas flags in Sydney and Melbourne, people with explicit Hezbollah flags in Sydney and Melbourne. We saw this over and over and over again for like a year and a half.
What is the? Let's go back to actually what I'm supposed to say in response to this. So you're saying the flag.
I want you to answer my question. Why would? Okay, we both agree that an American neo-Nazi who comes to this country to hold rallies filled with hate, he should be deported. But when it comes to a Lebanese guy holding a Hezbollah flag and he's not a citizen, you won't say that should be grounds for deportation. And you seemingly won't call these guys terrorist groups. Do you think Hamas is Hezbollah terrorist groups?
The thing is, I'm consistent on my support for free speech in this respect, because ultimately, wait on this issue, because the destruction that is being wrought upon Gaza by the IDF, to the tune of about
terrorists like to find them.
2 days. I think that it is ultimately generous that we're allowed to have flags in support of that side.
Israel. So you're saying that an Israeli flag is morally equivalent to a Hezbollah flag in Australia?
Yeah.
Okay, so you think that?
I think that's a pretty solid argument, actually. Yeah, how many people?
Not really, but I mean,
how many people has Israel killed in Gaza?
So are you aware of the time that Hezbollah sent a truck bomb to a Jewish community center in Argentina? Nothing to do with Israel-Palestine at all. And they just blew up a community center filled with 84 Jews in Argentina.
Are you aware of the time that Israel invaded Gaza and has killed hundreds of thousands of people?
Could I ask you, why did Israel invade Gaza?
Israel invaded Gaza in response to October 7th, but also as a larger as a larger project to invade and depopulate.
Would Israel be fighting a war in Gaza right now if Hamas had not invaded Israel and massacred 1,000 people?
They probably wouldn't be, waging this, but they would also be continuing their barrage of Gaza that was continuing at a lower level.
No, not really. There was like a 2 years. No, not really. There was years. No, there was years of no fighting in Gaza.
When?
There was in April 2023, there was like a really small engagement between Islamic Jihad and Israel. prior to that, there was like another 2-3 years where there was no conflict at all.
You can look up the death toll, the civilian death toll by year, and every single year there were Palestinians being killed. Every single year.
But what happened on October 7? Do you call it a terrorist attack?
Yes.
And you agree that civilians were massacred?
Yes.
And you agree that civilians were raped?
Yeah. I think that there's been credible credible
So
evidence of being exaggerated, but I don't think that there was. I think there was definitely some, and that's horrible.
Okay. So given it was like one of the worst terrorist attacks in human history, what country on earth would not wage a military campaign in response to that?
There's a difference between waging a military campaign and waging a genocide.
Okay, when did the genocide start? Would you say it started on October 8 or did it start on October 9? At what point did it start?
I mean, it seems the thing with Israel is that they've had a genocidal intent towards the Palestinians for a long time.
Would you say there was any genocidal intent on the part of Palestinians towards Israelis, considering, for example, the Hamas charter contained multiple clauses talking about the genocidal destruction of Israel?
What I can say is that, ultimately one side is able to execute that, and it's
so
Israel.
The fact that Hamas can't massacre every Jew that's just like what's
there is one side that is actually doing the genocide. That's the issue.
But you agree. Okay, so you agree that if Hamas had the opportunity, they would massacre all Jews.
I don't necessarily think that. No.
Okay, if Hamas were winning the war, what would have happened?
I don't know, and I don't support Hamas.
Okay,
the fact is that the Hamas would never. There's no scenario in which this happens, though. Hamas is like has the tiniest amount of resources compared to what Israel.
Well, it wasn't just Hamas, though, was it? It was fighting there was like a 7-front war against Israel at one point with Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Yemeni, the Houthis from Yemen.
Yemen and Iran.
But also, we both know as well. The whole point of October 7, they wanted Hezbollah to fight at the exact same time. They wanted Hezbollah to attack from the north at the exact same time. If there was a 2-front war, there actually was they could have been successful. They could have killed hundreds of thousands of people.
I mean, I don't think that that's the case. I just don't think that that's the case at all. I mean, Israel has one of the biggest militaries in the world. The thing is, I think that ultimately this is all irrelevant. When we are how long ago was October 7th? Almost 2 years ago. We're 2 years into a genocide, and we're still.
Here's a question. Here's a question. Would you call for Hamas to surrender the hostages and just end the fighting? Would you call for Hamas to lay down their arms?
They should give up the hostages 100%. No,
would you say they should surrender?
Pardon?
Would you say that Hamas should surrender?
Israel is bulldozing.
But would you say that Hamas should stop trying to? But would you say that Hamas should stop trying to launch military attacks against Israel?
Yeah, I think that's probably yeah.
So would you say that Hamas
is a right to resist occupation, and Palestine is under occupation? I don't think, but I don't.
So
think,
it's good for Hamas. If Hamas kill IDF soldiers in Gaza, it's good.
Yeah. They are bulldozing. They are committing a genocide and bulldozing their cities. That you can literally look up video of them bulldozing their buildings.
You think Hamas is therefore a legitimate entity that should have the right to continue
demolitions so that they can clear it? Ben Gvir is literally doing conventions outside of Gaza, bragging about resettling
Do you think that Hamas should be left in charge of Gaza?
No.
Okay.
I think that, but I don't think that's for us to impose. It isn't for us to do like a regime change operate. That wouldn't.
Why?
It isn't for
wouldn't
Australia
October 7 be enough for regime? No, but wouldn't it be enough for any entity that carries out October 7? There should be regime change against that entity. It just shouldn't be left in charge of a territory to govern.
There have been atrocities committed do you think there should be a regime change? Do you think we should do a regime? Well, actually, that would be pretty fair.
Well, I think
that a
Netanyahu.
regime change
I want to.
Israel,
Well,
or
I do.
Turkey
I
with
actually
this
do want a regime change in Israel. I don't like Netanyahu. I do want a regime change in Israel. Actually,
So you think that we should do a regime change in Israel?
no, not a military regime, because Israel, they can still be democratic elections to get rid of Netanyahu. But in Gaza, but let me say this. Okay, this is the difference. This is the difference. So in Israel, you can hold a democratic election to get rid of Netanyahu, and polls show that there's a good chance that will happen at the next election in Israel.
Yeah, and it'd be replaced with another
Gaza, but in Gaza, they are killing the opposition to Hamas. Hamas is going around executing their opponents within the Palestinian civil society of Gaza.
Okay. Why can we just to bridge on the point that you just made? If that is the democratic will within Israel, then what's your if you were to replace Netanyahu with any of the other anybody who's not a total rabbinic scholar or elsewise which is not likely to happen, right? If that is the will of the Israeli people and they want that, what's the your objection then becomes against I assume your entire objection is against what you would see, and I'm going to put words in your mouth here, is the imperialist project of Israel.
I mean, yeah, that is certainly.
Okay. I mean, okay, because otherwise we're going to talk in circles. Drew, and you are going to talk in circles for another half an hour, which is very entertaining. But just to sort of play moderator here, I have my own views, but I know that those will set the cat amongst the pigeons on both sides. So best to try and moderate that instead. So in terms of that, yeah, Drew, Drew, your response to that, and then we can continue forth from
response to exactly what part? Sorry,
to the objection of the imperialist project of Israel. And I'm sorry, I forgot your name, Greens guy.
Greens guy. That'll do.
Look,
sorry,
I have to say.
Yeah,
let me say, right?
Feel free to elaborate on your actual position on Israel as an imperialist project.
I think that the Israelis and Palestinians should have equal rights, have democratic rights within Palestine. I think that ultimately,
so you want a democratic one-state solution.
That would be my favorite outcome.
How do you do that though?
Minority rights protections for both.
Okay, how do you do that though? How do you have a one-state solution rather than a two-state solution, given it's pretty demonstrable that it would just collapse into a civil war within seconds?
The thing is, this has been the two-state solution that we've been watching.
No, this hasn't been the two-state solution, because that's not true, because Hamas actually derailed two-state solution negotiations with suicide bus bombing attacks and everything. For 20 years now, Hamas have been working to just try to destroy a two-state solution.
There has been, and you're saying that when Israel has been settling in the West Bank. Do you know who Rabin is? Rabin, that's
the Israeli Prime Minister.
Yitzhak Rabin.
Yeah. The one is that's the early 2000s one, right?
The one who was assassinated.
Yeah.
So, okay. Do you know, for example, how Netanyahu first came to power? Netanyahu came to power. So Rabin was the one who was trying to negotiate the two-state solution. Rabin was killed by a radical extremist on the Israeli side, and then afterwards, there were still attempts to try get the two-state solution rolling, but unfortunately, Hamas then carried out a campaign of bus bombing attacks in Israel. The whole point of it was to try and stop the two-state solution from happening. What that did was it effectively destroyed the Israeli left, because the Israeli left were the ones who were negotiating the peaceful. The Israeli left were the ones who were trying to negotiate the disengagement and the two-state solution. And then what happened was Israeli society were like, oh, well, given the left are the ones who are trying to negotiate the two-state solution and we're just getting suicide bombing attacks from Hamas, we're not going to support the two-state solution anymore. So Hamas did that on purpose. That was that was their goal. And Max Hooper's trying to get me. He's like, who assassinated Rabin? I literally just said it was an Israeli extremist. The reason I brought up Rabin was he was the one who was making really good efforts to make the two-state solution. He was unfortunately assassinated by extremists on the Israeli side. But then the extremists on the Palestinian side, the Hamas, literally started doing a suicide bus bombing attack. And that's how Netanyahu was first elected. Netanyahu was first elected on the Israeli right wing because it was a response to the Hamas bombing attacks. The Israeli left were trying to create the two-state solution, and they lost their credibility with the Israeli population because of what Hamas did with the bus bombing attacks. And so that's my point, right? Like this has been going on for more than 20 years now. There's been concerted efforts by extremists. Unfortunately, on both sides, I do think on both sides it exists. Of course, Ben Gvir, I hate Ben Gvir. But there has been a very concerted effort by Hamas, for example, for 20 plus years now to try to destroy any hope of a two-state solution.
Yeah. I mean you bring up this time period, but I think it is also important, I guess.
Like the reason I brought it up, I wasn't just trying to catch you out or anything or do 20 questions.
No, I understand.
The reason I brought it up is like you think, oh well, like Hamas was just doing this in response to settlers and there was never a two-state solution. But like there was an actual concerted effort to do a two-state solution from the Israeli side, and Hamas met that with bus bombing attacks. And they've kept up this pattern of the pattern has been the same for 25 years now. It's rejectionism, and unfortunately, the rejectionism actually goes all the way back. Like, are you aware, for example, of the response to the 1967 war when Israel conquered the West Bank from Jordan and conquered Gaza from Egypt? They wanted to do a peace deal, and the Arab states immediately.
20 years old at that point.
No, but let me finish this point. The Arab states immediately met the 1967 war with the Three No's proclamation, where they just said no recognition of Israel, no land swaps with Israel, nothing, no peace. So there's been rejectionism for like 60, 70 years now from the Arab side as well.
I mean, it's rejecting ultimately what was an unjust proposition in the first place.
So you start from the proposition that there should never have even been the creation of Israel then?
I am anti the Nakba, yes.
Okay, then what is there even to debate? Because you're never going to accept Israel's right to defend itself if you don't think that Israel should never have ever been created in the first place.
Look, I think there's a practical argument for a two-state solution. I think Norm Finkelstein actually supports a two-state solution for practical reasons. I think that you
bring up the Nakba, but are you aware, there was the UN partition plan. They tried to have a two-state solution. The UN tried to broker it. The Arab side rejected it.
Yeah. If they say, oh, we're going to take half of your land and expel half of the people from your land, it's like, oh,
hang on,
well,
I ask you a question?
thank you
for not
doing it all.
Let me ask you a question, Braden. You previously said that governments shouldn't look after the interests of their own people first, right? So why is it that
I also said that that it shouldn't be it shouldn't be like putting down your own citizens, and I do think that there is just about nothing more than putting down your own citizens than ethnically cleansing them. So
you agree that ethnically cleansing Australians would be wrong?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, it's good to know that you're against white genocide. Good to know. Now.
I don't think that immigration is ethnic.
I'm just joking. I'm joking. I was fine. But okay, are you aware, for example, that in the 1930s, the leaders of the Arab nationalist side tried their hardest to prevent Jewish immigrants from fleeing the Holocaust and entering Palestine? Would you agree with that immigration restrictionism at the time?
What was the question? That you would people moving?
Okay,
no.
Okay, do you know Amin al-Husseini?
No, I don't.
Okay, Amin al-Husseini was the leader of the Palestinian nationalist cause throughout the 1930s and 40s. He was originally installed in the post of Grand Mufti of Jerusalem by the British, but he eventually
the guy that is this the guy that looks like Ryan Gosling?
What did you say? Well, he met with Hitler, right? He met with Hitler during World War II.
The guy that looks like Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a bit of a brain-rotted approach to this, I will admit, but just anti-genocide is the main thing.
Okay, but he did meet with Hitler during World War II. Mm-hmm. He wrote in his memoir that Himmler informed them about the Holocaust, that there were death camps and everything. Then after the fact that even after he was informed, he did radio broadcasts from Berlin calling on Arabs to rise up and slaughter Jews across the Middle East. And when there were attempts to facilitate the transport of Jewish children from Hungary to Palestine, British mandatory Palestine at the time, he actually lobbied really hard against it, writing to all the Axis government saying, don't let these Jewish children come to British Palestine. He said, send them back to Poland. And he knew that the Holocaust was taking place. He knew there were death camps taking place.
Yeah, seems like
so presumably you're against that, right? I'm raising this point to say, you think, oh, well, Israel should never have been created. It's just the Nakba and stuff. But there's been genocidal intent against Jews going back more than... Are you aware of the Hebron massacre?
Racism doesn't justify ethnically cleanse. It's like the Australians are racist against migrants. Does that mean the migrants are allowed to come here and like ethnically cleanse?
Some people seem to think that for some reason on the green side. Some people on the green side seem to think that.
Okay, well then apparently you get on with them because you're supportive of the Nakba. But
I don't support the Nakba. I support the UN partition plan of 1947. I would have loved to have seen a two-state solution, not the Nakba. Unfortunately, what happened was every surrounding Arab state invaded Israel, and some of the leaders of these armies were literally former SS soldiers. Like, for example, are you aware of the Arab Liberation Army?
Look, there were. You can play this on both sides. What was that? You can play this on both sides. What is the I'm sorry. It is literally midnight. I'm blanking on the name. One of you will probably know it. What's the one that was aligned with the Nazis, the Zionist militia?
That's so marginal. That's so marginal compared to Amin al-Husseini, who's literally the leader of the Palestinian National Movement at that time.
Leahy, that was it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's so marginal, and that was
quite a few. They did a few attacks. They did quite a few attacks.
Wait, Leahy against the British? You mean Leahy attacks on the British colonial authorities?
Yeah.
I thought you were in favor of British I thought you were in favor of anti-imperialism against the British.
Well,
what do you think anti-imperialism looks like? Do you think it looks like essays? Like, honestly, like does it I mean that's a very
the famous
point.
quote after October 7th.
Yeah, that's what anti-imperialism looks like. It does.
Remember the famous quote after October 7 on Twitter where everyone was like, "Well, this is what anti-imperialism looks like."
Yeah, well, it depends what the end goal is. I think whether it is
most of those anti-imperial movements almost by their nature and in an almost ethno state or a dominant where ethnicity is pretty much settled, usually in a dominant tribal group. Right, like that is the end state of almost all of the anti-imperial violent movements that existed throughout the 20th.
Well, Algeria, for example, Algeria expelled all the Jews.
Algeria,
like, do you think
Zimbabwe? You run down the list.
What do you think of the Algeria model?
The Algeria model? You mean the expulsion?
Yeah, mass expulsions.
Yeah, I don't support that. No.
Okay, I'm glad that you don't.
Obviously, a lot of that was led to by backlash against a lot of. I'm not just talking about Algeria, but like generally, expulsions around the Middle East was provoked by obviously polarization against.
So sometimes ethnic cleansing can be provoked. Sometimes it could be.
I mean, it wasn't justified. It was terrible. It was atrocities. I mean, I don't think that I'm not justifying it in any way. I'm just noting that fact that it didn't come out of nowhere.
Can you answer Philip's question on the screen here? Because I'm interested.
Mm-hmm. Is Armenia an illegitimate state because Ruben Ter Almassian ethnically cleansed thousands of Azerbaijani farmers from present-day Armenia in 1919 to 1920. I can't say I am completely familiar with the politics of 1920s Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Here's a good question for you. You would be familiar with the fact that the formation of Turkey as a modern nation state was accompanied by like the genocide of the Armenians, the genocide of Greeks, the genocide of Assyrians. Now, given the formation of the modern nation state of Turkey was accompanied by these horrible atrocities, would you agree with abolishing Turkey as a nation state?
I think it's slightly different. I think as Turkey, it's slightly different because it was a very concerted. It wasn't just in Israel. It wasn't just a kind of, I guess, how would you use the word? It wasn't just the construction of an ethno state or a state that privileges one group above others. It was a settler colonial state. It was traveling to somewhere else to displace the people that were living there.
So Turkey genociding all their ethnic minorities in the formation of the nation state.
As I was about to say, I actually very much oppose the state.
I'm
of
sure
Turkey
you do. I'm
as it
just
currently
pointing out
exists.
the logical
I've done more opposing Turkey than anyone else.
Dude, I
than
know.
anything else that I've done. I've run an email campaign trying to get people to talk about, trying to get our politicians to do something about Rojava and oppose Turkey's cleansing of
Dude,
Kurds.
Brayden, I know that you're not a supporter of like Turkish nationalists. I know you support the Kurds. The reason I'm bringing this up though is I seriously can't see the difference between why Turkey should exist as a state, but Israel should be abolished. Based on, obviously there's been founding injustices in, the formation of so many modern nation states. Turkey is a great example, but you don't see like you don't see the equivalent of anti-Zionism for Turkey. You just don't see that, right? Like no one's going around saying Turkey should not exist as a country. So why is it just that it's only Israel that should not exist as a country? It just doesn't really make sense to me.
I think it's because it's the most glaring one, and it's also that
Why is it
it is one of the most glaring ones. At the moment, it is the single most glaring one. And then if you go into the past, it definitely was one of them. But the thing is, the difference is, I think, fundamentally, you can talk about Turkey, but I think that in recent memory, you can talk about the foundation of Turkey. In recent memory, though, everything that Israel's been doing is worse than what Turkey's been doing.
The Armenian genocide killed like 2 million people.
Yeah, when the Armenian genocide, I'm saying in recent memory, which is when the movement is now. And then I would say as well is that it's because the West is aligned with Israel. Because you can go, sure, the West is somewhat aligned with Turkey, but it's kind of Turkey's
a member of NATO state.
Turkey is a member of NATO, but American.
Turkey's a NATO state that occupies northern Cyprus.
You're never going to get the glowing profile of Turkey that you are going to get out of any American president over Israel.
American presidents line up to fucking kiss Turkey.
You see? They literally will call.
Has any American president stopped
Israel great again? This is
Has any American president of the past 50 years stopped Turkey from occupying northern Cyprus?
No, and that's bad.
I agree, it's bad, of course. I'm just saying, like, why is it just this one double standard when it comes to Israel? Like when it comes to Israel, everyone must drop everything they're doing right away, work the rest of their lives to abolish this one state. But Turkey can exist as a country. All these other countries that have also massive injustices torn up in their histories, they can all just exist for some reason.
Because you list all these other countries, and you can list a bunch of other countries, but the fact is that Israel is the one that we are most aligned with. Now, I also think there needs to be a massive thing about Turkey. There needs to be a massive thing about Indonesia as well. But I think that the ultimately the fact is, and it's especially clear now, there is no competition now. Post this last couple years of genocide, there is no debate over what is the most glaring injustice currently being perpetrated in Palestine.
More people died in Sudan last year than in Gaza. Why aren't you talking about Sudan right now?
Because there is, so first of all, the numbers that are being thrown around, like we're really still throwing around like 40,000 people, I think, which they stopped counting like 2 years, like a year ago.
There's no proper counts in Sudan either. There's no proper counts in Yemen. There's no proper counts. The Tigray War. This is a really good example. Tigray War.
That is all bad. But here's the thing.
The Tigray War 3 years ago. Dude, 4 years ago, there was literally a massive genocide in Ethiopia where like 500,000 people died just 4 years ago. Nobody even knows what the Tigray War was. And I just take issue to you saying this is the one thing in the entire world that we should all focus on.
Here's the difference. That we are close. Well, not necessarily Australia. Australia is a bit more complicated, but the West generally is close allies with Israel. This is the moral question of our time, whether we can continue to be allied with this. And as many anti-imperialists will say, it's getting really late, so I have to. I'll have to.
I know. We'll head off. We'll head off in 5 minutes. I appreciate that you stayed so long.
But the thing is that you have to start somewhere. There are so many injustices that go on in the world, and I think that choosing the one that is the one that we are potentially most. Now that the genocide proper has started in the last year and a half, I can say this is the one where we are most aligned with, and the most glaring one that we are the most aligned with.
Can I ask you a question?
This is how we can affect change. And
okay, I got to ask you a question.
Opposing the genocide in Gaza, you will see, if you go to Palestine rallies, you will see West Papuan flags. You will see. You might even see. I saw, cardboard signs with Ukrainian flags as well.
Yeah, two or three. I've also seen pro-Russia people at these rallies, literally holding signs of Putin. But listen, here's a good example. I remember, it was 6 months in or 9 months in before, even I remember the claims of genocide started literally in the first week of the conflict. Now, even setting that aside for 1 second, I remember 6 months into the thing, there was a big concerted effort, the Block the Dock movement, where they wanted to block the Melbourne dock, and there was somebody literally suspending themselves off a crane when it came to supposedly Australia exporting parts of spare weapons to Israel. Yeah. Now, look at this, right? Australia's trade with Israel is 0.1% of our GDP. It is such a small infinitesimal. I think we trade $15 million or something like that. It's a really tiny infinitesimal fraction. Now, you've got Free Tibet and Free Uyghurs in your handle. You know that this is a really bad issue. These groups are really brutally oppressed in China. I've been banging on about this for 5 years. Why is there no left-wing movement in Australia to blockade the dock when it comes to exporting minerals to China, which is $300 billion a year, $200 billion a year, $300 billion a year?
Our largest export market.
Literally, yeah. If you're saying this is what we're so closely tied to, dude, I know this was what I've been banging on about for 5 years. I think Australia's way more morally complicit in what China's been doing to these various groups, Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers. Massive amounts, they're carrying out these horrible atrocities, and we're fueling them hundreds of billions of dollars in exports every year. But how come there's no left-wing protesters blocking the dock?
Well, I think the blocking the dock, I don't think that is necessarily going to be constructive. I don't think that there's in at least in the China example, there's no real way we can decouple ourselves economically from China. I think that.
But we can blockade the dock to Israel, though. We'll shut down the entire Melbourne port because we might ship $2 million a year's worth of stuff to Israel.
I think that ultimately we need to look at what we can do, and the fact is that there is the most glaring stuff that we are complicit in. Obviously, I believe what's going on in Tibet is bad. What's going on in occupied East Pakistan is bad. What is the threats on Taiwan are bad, but they all pale in comparison to the death toll in Gaza.
Why are you saying these horrible atrocities? Why play the Oppression Olympics like that? Why say these atrocities are not as important as? Because the Tibetans are fucking brutally repressed for 70 years. Yeah. The Tibetans and the Uyghurs, if you're talking about the foundation of the state of Israel, the Tibetans and the Uyghurs were invaded and occupied at basically the exact same time. The exact same time. It was the late 40s by China. And Australia ships hundreds of billions of dollars in minerals to China every single year. And meanwhile, your left-wing allies are blocking the dock. Literally, we're trying to shut down the entire Melbourne port for $2 million in exports to Israel. We're exporting $200 billion a year to China, and no one's blocking the dock for that. So I just don't understand. Why is that?
It's completely different.
Why?
The fact is that ultimately, if you can look at my fucking ridiculous bio. I am self-aware about it. It is fucking ridiculous.
And look, I admire the consistency, but I just don't know why your left-wing allies block the dock, try to shut down the entire port of Melbourne for one thing, but when it comes to China, where we're 100 times more complicit, no one cares.
Here's my answer: is that okay? Look at all of the injustices going on in the world right now. The fact is, if you try and be perfectly consistent and say we're going to oppose everything, you will not have a cohesive movement. It just isn't.
But if,
it isn't.
If it's just
It isn't
about
the case.
what Australia's
You have
most complicit
to-
in,
you have
we're
to
so much
pick
more
it-
complicit on China.
No, to bring it back to something you said earlier, if and I'll play Drew's argument out for him a little more cleanly. If you're trying to do the greatest good to the greatest amount of people, wouldn't it, and then have the greatest impact, wouldn't it therefore stand that rather than blocking, $2 million in, it's maybe 3 containers on a ship to Israel, you would block entire ships full of coal, it's a double header there. Of
No
coal,
one's ever done that in
iron
Australia.
ore,
Not a single
or
left-wing
manufactured,
activist.
semi-manufactured goods to China, and you're blocking a whole ship, which is going to just, pretty much just going to Qingdao or to Shanghai. You would do far more, both economic damage, and in terms of making an impact.
I think it's my response to this.
It's because China is an anti-Western country.
It isn't just Australia. It is the anti-genocide and the pro-Palestine movement.
But we're asking specifically why they blocking the dock in Melbourne for 2 ships, 2 compartments on a fucking ship. When we're literally doing 200.
That is a small piece of an entire, massive global movement that spans from like so many countries in the world of support for Palestine and opposition to Israel's genocide.
Because there's a global there's a global wave of anti-Semitism where it's just no Jews, no news.
Let me finish my point.
It's global hatred of Jews, yes.
My point is that you have to pick and choose to some extent, because you need to look at how you can most effectively oppose imperialism. And the fact is that there is a global movement. You make this point about China, that you could do, a blocking this cargo ship that's going to Shanghai. The thing is, that would be an isolated action that doesn't have this massive global movement behind it in the way that opposing genocide does. Opposing the genocide in Gaza
with one container on it. Blocking a ship with 1 container on it heading to Israel is a part of the fucking global movement.
It is.
Meanwhile, we're shipping 200. We're shipping 200 million coal to China every year, and they're genociding Tibetans and Uyghurs.
I mean, and on that same point, which brings it back to Israel, like, you can have this global movement, and it's done fuck all. Like, it's done fuck all. Like, to be quite blunt, it's done fuck all. Like, as you correctly pointed out, Israel is just bulldozing the Palestinian apartment blocks and running F-35s up and down the strip. Like, the end game is
I don't like the
mass
violence. I want the
expulsion.
violence to end.
Yeah, well, look, but it's, and I'm going to come in here finally, but it's not right. And there are 2 states here engaged, of various levels of power, who are engaged in what is effectively open conflict, and one is just going to waste the other, right? Like, to be quite blunt, like, Palestine will not win. The Gaza Strip is gone, and they're just going to mass expel all the Palestine.
I don't want that. I want to clarify.
Well, you don't want that, but that's being brutally realistic. That's what's going to happen. Like, to bring it back to reality, that's what's going to happen.
That's what Israel stated they're going to do, and they are doing.
Yeah, they're going to do it, and everybody around the world can sit in the street and wave Palestinian flags or sit by the side of a road, but unless you're going to militarily stop them, which I've seen no state willing to do that, because either in the region they're basically militarily weaker, and Israel has nuclear weapons, like, you're basically like, it's fucking game over. I'm sorry, but like, it's fait accompli. Like, we could all sit there and block every ship in Australian ports that might send a single piece of grain or a single microchip to Israel. It wouldn't make a fucking iota of a difference. To be quite blunt.
I'm not endorsing what Chris is saying, but
you don't have to avow this, Drew. I'm finally I'm gonna open salvo.
Okay, what do you say to that, Brent? Because look, I don't like what Chris is saying, but I'm interested in what you say.
No, I'm taking a hardcore realist view. I know, I accept that, Drew, you're not on board with this.
I think that there's ultimately, I do think there has been, at the very least, a change in the discourse surrounding Palestine as a result of the you can see record low support for Israel, and the ultimately, I guess we've tried and influenced public opinion in the West greatly through this campaign.
Maybe
And
maybe you didn't influence public opinion in the right way because there was so much alienating shit. Like, do you think, for example, blocking the Christmas windows because we shouldn't allow Australian kids to celebrate Christmas during Palestine? Like, so you admit that's stupid?
The thing is, Drew, you are talking about blocking Christmas windows when when hundreds of thousands of people are dead and a country is about to expel.
You have to consider the strategy. You're saying, okay, we need to do something to change public opinion. I actually say yes. Like, I think it's wrong. I want the war to stop, right? Was it a good strategy to block Christmas windows in Melbourne and be like, Australian kids shouldn't celebrate Christmas? Yeah, okay. So we agree, like, maybe the movement had a lot of bad strategy, tactics, and stuff like that.
Philip, we'll come to your question. Don't worry. I promise. Go ahead.
Do you want to answer this, Braden?
No. Dresden wasn't genocide. That isn't genocide. Isn't just when civilians die. That's a different. Civilians dying is bad. It doesn't mean it's necessarily that isn't the meaning of that word. So no, in my opinion, and I think that's a bit of a weird kind of. I believe that's what a Nazi would say, right? Is that Dresden was genocide?
He doesn't think. I know he doesn't think that Dresden's genocide. I think he's trying to make a point where he thinks that Israel's actions are analogous to Dresden. He's got another question.
Yeah,
and I don't know, but this is another question he's got. Does he know who Francois Genot is?
No, I don't. I was before we. This is why, honestly, I wanted to.
Look, we can probably do a full Israel-Palestine one.
Nazi diaspora. Yeah, I don't know this guy.
The reason why he's bringing up Francois Genot is he backed a lot of the Palestinian militant groups against Israel.
The anti-Semites opposing. I mean, I know
opposing Israel. Yeah,
like Nick Fuentes is like really anti-Israel. I don't think that that this is like necessarily a slam dunk. I think it's pretty apparent that people that are really anti-Semitic are going to oppose a Jewish state.
So, are you opposed to a Jewish state in principle?
I'm opposed to an ethno-state of any kind.
Okay, beautiful. So, no Palestinian
Australian Aboriginal ethno-state?
No, I don't think that would be a good thing either.
Palestinian Arab ethno-state?
No.
Well, that's what a lot of the people.
As I said, my preferred solution was a democratic state with equal rights and minority protections for both.
Unfortunately, the realist response is that a lot of people on the Palestinian side want a Palestinian Arab ethno-state. Like the chance and
the Israeli government explicitly wants an Israeli ethno-state.
Well, the Hamas explicitly wants a Palestinian Arab ethno-state. It's a bad situation.
And one force has the greater force of one force has a greater force of arms, and I think that's the determining factor. That is leaving it up to God in some sense, right?
And it's also
not that I believe, but like that is like that's a
key point. Go ahead.
But like that, I think that's effectively the point. Is that Palestine, in its various forms throughout the years, has failed in its ability to garner international support diplomatically, or to garner the level of military capability it would need to overthrow the Israeli state. And it is really thus failed the test of God in terms of nations that want to overthrow their, imperial master, whatever that is, and will suffer likewise. That's a story rid of human. That's a story rid of human history over thousands of years. Like I'm just like, it's kind of a cope to say, well, we support them. Well, as unfortunate as that is, that's sort of, that's the L.
I do think Chris is too brutal here, but Philip has a comment.
I know you think that, Drew, but like that is like I'm just trying to distill this down to like the hard
Philip has this comment. Look, we can make this the last one because I'm actually really tired myself too because it's like literally 1 a.m. I appreciate that you've done it for so long, Brandon. And look, we can do like a proper setup one with like Adu and stuff like that about this stuff if you want. We could literally do a like proper 2v2 debate. I can do it with Chris and you can do it with Adu and we can have a proper.
I didn't really want to debate Palestine. I'm going to be honest.
Well, I didn't
know I'd be on tonight. I was going to ask if we could talk about housing, but
look, we can just do the next one.
I will leave it.
Oh, with Drew, you're always going to end up talking about Israel.
Yeah,
I want to say, I wasn't like trying to trap you or anything. I didn't think that we were going to talk about Israel Palestine either. It just came up, obviously. But
yeah,
but look, okay, like, do you want?
The fact is that I'm not that. We can talk about what would a hypothetical ideal state look like? What if Hamas was in control of the entirety of Israel? All of these questions, while I guess some are important, some aren't, but ultimately, what's your ideal solution for Israel Palestine? I think these questions, while they might be important, ultimately the answer is somewhat irrelevant at the moment when you are dealing with a genocide with hundreds of thousands of people being killed, starved out, cut off of their resources. Israel is explicitly saying they want to ethnically cleanse them, resettle them in Egypt or in wherever. They are currently, you can watch videos of controlled demolitions in Gaza of diggers and bulldozers bulldozing Palestinian homes, and then Ben Gvir going outside of Gaza with Daniela Weiss to say that we are going to resettle Gaza, and Trump saying how it's going to be this big metropolis, and that is the reality of what is going on now. And so I think all of these other questions about the history, while they're relevant and while they're important, they don't get to the heart of what is going on right now, which is there is a genocide. And I think that they're not opposing it is incredibly immoral. And it is a moral imperative when you have the president of the United States, who the Liberal Party will say is our greatest ally. I think even the Labour Party might say is our greatest ally. When you have
that is the underlying statement of Australian foreign policy. Yes.
Well, the United States is not
exactly, and then you have the leader of that country endorsing that, endorsing the ethnic cleansing, and endorsing Palestine being completely bulldozed. That is the reality of what is going on, and that's why I didn't want to necessarily talk about Palestine, because I don't think that there is much to debate when that is what is going on.
Look, I could debate you. I could respond to that, but it has been 3.5 hours, and it
has been 3.5 hours. That's what I just wanted to leave it at that. That's why.
Look, I'll let you have the last word on this one because it's literally 1 a.m. I've made my point over and over and over again on both here and on Twitter. Look, I actually Brayden, obviously we have a lot of disagreements, but it actually was good fun debating. And I think it'd be a good idea. We can do a proper structured one. Maybe like Leo can be the moderator or whatever, but we can do that with Adu. I apologize because I know that you came on last minute and I wasn't trying to trap you.
Can we do housing for that one? I think.
Yeah, let's do housing for that one.
Pat has said that. I think that if
I actually agree.
I think it's a lot more of a pertinent issue with a lot more scope rather than coming to heads.
Look, at the end of the day, none of us can change what's happening in the Middle East. At the end of the day, none of us can change that. So let's talk about Australian politics in the next debate, maybe.
Yeah.
Could I just quickly bait this one commenter that you've got up on screen so
Which one?
You can hate me some more?
I'll be
genocide is real and is being executed currently by the US government.
Can you explain that?
I just wanted to say that so that guy can get a little mad. But
can you explain that? That I've not heard the term transgenocide before. Can you explain that?
You haven't? Oh wow, you're not on the right side of Twitter, Drew. No,
what actually is the argument there?
Essentially, like making banning trans healthcare is essentially genocidal because it has been proven to lead to the deaths of trans people and exterminating them. Essentially.
I'll read into it. On the face of it,
look it up. No, but yeah, I just wanted to piss that guy off before I left.
They actually say that like having restrictions on people under the age of 18 with the
No,
healthcare?
well, it's like stuff like, you know, I mean, Trump is trying to ban it wholesale, basically.
For adults as well.
Yeah, he's been doing stuff like cutting off funding to like healthcare providers that do it, and then but there's very little solo just gender healthcare providers, so it's essentially like blanket restrictions. And if that goes through, then yeah, that would be genocidal. But
ADK asks, are the pokies genocidal?
Only genocidal if you bet on the wrong horses, mate.
So
true.
really,
No,
that's just
to be honest, the pokies are actually a really bad problem for Australia, though. It is sad. Like
they are. You know, ask the Whitlams. You know, ask them if it's genocidal.
Look, let's just say the one constructive agreement that me and Braden did have at one point was we both agreed that 5 billion people shouldn't die. So, like,
that is true.
We do disagree with the charred policy of billions.
Look, we're really lucky.
It's linked. It's just
5 billion
basic
Palestinians, because then Drew would have probably taken the other position.
That's
But
ridiculous,
we're lucky that it was just people generally.
Oh my god, that's so ridiculous. I don't want the war to continue. I would prefer that Hamas surrender and the war end. That's literally my statement. And I want a two-state solution. I'm not fucking like, I hate Ben Gvir. This whole thing that Drew's Ben Gvir just because I don't want the destruction of Israel. Like, that's a bit ridiculous. But all right, look. What do you say?
Yeah. Well, I have
we'll
to go
end
to bed.
there.
There's a protest tomorrow outside the council because they're evicting homeless people, so I need to get up for that.
All right. Well, good luck with that, Braden. And look, maybe later this week or something, we can do the proper housing one with Adu. That would actually be fun. And I've been meaning to debate Adu for a long time.
Yeah, honestly, I'll probably just sit there, let him do it. He's really knowledgeable on this stuff. You got no
do it
anyway. I'll see you.
All right. Drew and you can sit there and look at each other, and Adu and I can, bring out the Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoints.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you for watching. That was actually a great stream. Thank you, guys. All right. Thank you, Brandon. All right. Bye-bye.
Pog.